What is happening out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? Welcome to the Tuesday show, gang. Hope everybody's doing well. Back at it today after an off day yesterday. A little bit of a surprise off day. Just woke up feeling a little bit under the weather. Not sure where I picked it up, but just like a weird, 24-hour, slap in the face cold. You can probably hear it in my voice. Feel a lot better today, but I think I had a fever. It was really weird. But back at it today. We had projections up and everything yesterday. Hit a couple of the home run picks were all right. And had the Phillies in my lineup, but not the Brewers didn't end up coming through for me. Who else did I have in there? I ended up using Pavetta on the mound. Didn't really come through for me. Had an okay game. But hopefully some people out there pick some things up. I know we had good ratings on Tyler O'Neill, who hit 2 home runs. Kyle Schwarber, who hit 2 home runs in the home run model. I know those guys were highly projected in that, so hopefully everybody did well with that. Got a great slate today. Really interesting looking one. Should be fun to talk about. Let's pull this up and get right into it. We've got 10 games on board. I'm going to go kind of, relatively quickly. I think quickly for us through it, but not skimping on any details, certainly. But just to rest the voice a little bit and to not have to, I don't know. We'll see what happens. But we've got a lot to talk about, I guess is the point. Cujo's here. What's going on, Cujo? Hope your Tuesday's going well too, buddy. Hope everybody had a good Monday. Hope all the fathers out there had good Father's Days. Having brunch with my parents tomorrow for Father's Day. Didn't end up getting down to my sister's. Would have been one of those weird things where it would have been like, I get down there for an hour of the day kind of a thing, was the way that my mom was explaining it to me as far as the timing goes. So she just said, we'll come up on Wednesday and we'll go to brunch. Cool. Mama's here. Mama says Schwarber made up for the ground rule double. Love it. Sounds like he hit something nice there. Andy Melman's here. Cujo's here. Steven Leibowitz is here. Monty Pritchett is here. Good luck. Great day to win something. Absolutely. It's a very sunny day, but it's also very hot here in the New York area. It's like 80-something degree, high 80s, 86, low 90s, somewhere in there. I don't know where it is actually now. Should play well for games in the area, and I know it's hot all up and down at least the East Coast. I know there's a hurricane blowing in somewhere along the way. But yeah, we're hitting that part of summer. And you can see it a little bit reflected in this first game that's up on the board here. No spoilers for that one, but we kind of like both sides for offense. Sounds like the phone is ringing. All right, let's get into the to the board here. So that first game up, the Orioles and the Yankees, 9-run total there. Pretty even up on the board. I mean, Yankees favored, but it's not a gigantic line. It's not one where we could normally see the Yankees against a lot of other teams. Obviously, a very good AL East race between those two teams. Should be fun to watch through the rest of the year. 4.24 implied total for the Orioles, 4.86 on the Yankee side. Honestly, feels a little bit light on both sides. I do feel like you could get a little bit bigger of a run total there, especially given the environment today. Nestor's pretty decent, and it's Nestor Cortez going for the Yankees, and it's Albert Suarez, who's actually been pitching, I think, above his head a little bit so far this year. So that could be a spot where the Yankees certainly get to him, which is why I feel maybe the Yankees get over 5, maybe more like 4.5 for the Orioles, because they could certainly get to Nestor there. So just prefer the offenses in that one. Red Sox at the Blue Jays, just a 7.5 run total in that one. Chris Bassett, pretty decent option going up against Tanner Houck. Very expensive, but having an incredible season. He's been very, very good. He's got the hometown Blue Jays checked down to just 3.66 implied runs. And the favored Red Sox on the road, 3.92. Either side, on the right day, you could certainly get there with either of those teams, but neither one in the grand scheme of things looks all that appealing on a slate that does have some pretty high scoring spots. The Tigers at the Braves. Braves, one of the higher totals on the board at 5.05. They're going up against Casey Mize, who's been he's had his moments. He certainly hasn't been good, and he's had more downside, I think, than upside. The Braves haven't been, or they've at least been up and down. They haven't been completely elite this year. So it's not a good spot to play Mize, but he's very, very cheap. I think it is a believable value dart. Nothing more than that. He's very low strikeout right now. We're going to take a look at him, though. On the other side, another value pitcher, Spencer Schwellenbach. One of the Braves' top prospects, came straight up from Double A. He's got the Tigers checked down to just 4.06. He hasn't struck out too many in his first 3 starts in the show, but he went 6 innings in his last game. Had one messy one where he went 4 2/3 at Fenway, gave up 6 earned runs, but the other 2 starts weren't bad. So I think he's a little bit interesting, and there's certainly strikeout upside going up against that Tigers team, and he was a higher strikeout kid in the minors. So another interesting value spot there. He's very cheap. The Rays at the Twins. 8.5 run total there. Twins pretty heavily favored with Pablo Lopez on the mound. He's one of the top pitchers of the day. And I definitely think we can consider the Twins offense against Aaron Savali, who's just been not good this season overall. He's had a couple okay games. The most recent one was good. 6 strikeouts, gave up 1 earned run over 5 2/3. But by and large, Savali's been pretty gettable this year. So I think the Twins, who have been certainly very good, it's definitely a spot worth considering. 4.80 apiece for the Giants and the Cubs, but it's one of those wind is blowing out games at Wrigley. It's like a 15-mile-an-hour wind out to left. So if you're inclined to go chase that, it's certainly that spot. You can see a 9.5 run total. It's not one of those ones where Wrigley's getting up to like 11 runs or 10.5 runs. But 9.5 is certainly the second highest on that board. But we do have a few other 9-run spots, and several of them with teams that are just in better matchups, because there are 2 very good pitchers going in that game in Wrigley, and they're also pitchers who keep the ball down by and large. It's Logan Webb going for the Giants, and it's Justin Steele going for the Cubs. So that doesn't really, to me, despite the 4.80 implied totals and the big overall run total and the wind blowing out, that doesn't necessarily equal home run upside with those pitchers on the mound. I don't care if the wind's blowing out, if the ball's just going into the ground. So that might be a slightly deceptive one. We're going to have to consider that one a lot, because those are healthy totals for sure. Mets at the Rangers, 8.5 runs there, 4.38 for the Mets, 4.21 on the other side. Michael Lorenzen on the mound for Texas, Luis Severino on the mound for the Mets. Saw the Mets go off yesterday against John Gray. They're not bad. There are some bats in that lineup now. So the Mets are always worth considering against a pitcher like Michael Lorenzen. I can certainly see it. It's a decent total. Same with the Rangers. They've been a little bit up and down, but certainly some very good bats, some underperforming bats in that lineup as well. But 2 healthy totals there. I kind of like these 2 spots better than I like those 2 spots, oddly, just based on who's pitching. I don't think that's the way that everybody's going to see that one. Astros at the White Sox, 5.23 implied total for Houston, one of the bigger spots on the board, going up against Jonathan Cannon. 3.87 implied total for the White Sox. They're going up against Framber Valdez, another top pitcher on the slate. Love the opportunity for Framber today. Dodgers at the Rockies, a ridiculous 6.33 implied total for Los Angeles. The Rockies on the other side, 4.81 implied total. They're going up against Walker Buehler. It's Austin Gomber on the hill for Colorado. No Mookie Betts for the Dodgers, going to be out a few weeks, unfortunately. Broke his hand, I think, I want to say. Was that what it was? So leadoff Shohei Ohtani, the highest projected player on the slate. The Dodgers obviously still look like an excellent option. I was taking a look at the confirmed lineup for Colorado, though. While I like Walker Buehler, and while I've got him projected for a decent game today as far as like Coors games go, it's an interesting enough Colorado lineup. I don't love what they did at the bottom of the lineup, but there's an interesting stretch of mid-range, there's an interesting stretch of hitters in the middle of that lineup now. The Brewers at the Angels, one of my favorite spots for offense with the Brewers. Really love how they click together with a lot of the other high-end teams. 4.92 implied total going up against one of our favorite targets, Griff Canning, who gave up another 2 home runs in his most recent start against Arizona when we were targeting him. Certainly think we can look at that option again. I'm going pretty heavy Brewers right now. Love that spot. Angels going the other way, going up against Tobias Myers. A believable power spot for the Angels. He's given up a handful of home runs throughout his 8 starts this season. They're drawing some decent power. It's just when you stack a team like that, you really need to luck out a little bit with parts of that lineup contributing, parts of that lineup doing things that they don't normally do to help turn things over. So 4.18 implied total there. That is unless you're just directly picking off the exact correct home run guys from that team. 4.18 implied total for Los Angeles in that one. I think they're playable. We'll look at it. The Royals against the Athletics, 8-run total there, 4.25 implied total for Kansas City, 3.85 implied total for Oakland. Hogan Harris going for Oakland, and Alec Marsh drawing a pretty decent projection going up against that A's team that he's got under 4 runs. So another interesting spot for pitching. Or excuse me, Alec Marsh is an interesting spot for pitching. I think actually the Royals at just 4.25 against Hogan Harris might be a little underappreciated in terms of their quality upside. We do have some weather. The Rays at the Twins game seems like that's kind of a big risk right now, which is a shame because it would take that Twins team against Aaron Savali off the board, and it would take Pablo Lopez, who is, again, one of our top projected pitchers. He is our top projected pitcher on DraftKings. Other way around, Framber Valdez jumps over him on FanDuel. Would take him off the board. Right now, as of a few minutes ago, our pal Mr. Roth over at RG had that game as orange. A lot of rain around first pitch, and then he's basically saying either a late start or a delay in game is pretty likely. So always gets concerning there when we're talking about pitching, especially one of the more expensive pitchers on the slate at 9,700, 9,000. Those are good prices for Pablo Lopez in this spot. If you can get through the weather, then you've got an interesting option on your hands. It just doesn't seem like a great spot weather-wise. It does bring on the idea that if people are avoiding it and you want to chance it, or if you're building a lot of lineups and you want to dedicate a portion of those lineups to the probability that the game does play and that Pablo Lopez pitches his usual allotment of innings and does well, that's definitely an option where you could potentially, if people don't do that a lot, get to an under-owned Pablo Lopez in a very good spot at the top of the board. So just watch the weather in that one. The other spots there is, it seems like there's rain in the Colorado game as well, but it seems like it won't be that bad. Probably will be able to play through it or play around it. So not really worried about that. Again, the wind's out to left in Wrigley, and then it seems like the wind is blowing in. Actually, I didn't look at it directly. I didn't notice this one before. But the other Chicago game, the Houston at the White Sox game, wind is blowing in, just helps the Framber Valdez projection anyway. He stands to have a great game against that team. I know he's been up and down this season, but I think there's plenty of potential for Framber to succeed in that spot. Tanner Houck is just really expensive. Projects behind the other two because the Blue Jays are pretty good at limiting strikeouts. They're not pushovers like the White Sox. They haven't been as badly underperforming as a lot of the Rays. They've been underperforming, sure, but not as badly as the Rays, and again, low strikeout. So it just cuts his projection a little bit while he's also the most expensive pitcher. Makes him a little bit more difficult to get to. But I think, again, if you want to dedicate a certain set of shares, or if you're building one lineup, it's certainly a way to differentiate if there's a cheap stack that you really like. And you can pay for him, it's definitely going to be a way to differentiate. I think he ends up a little bit under-owned there, and he's been very, very good this season, so totally justifiable to use. Logan Webb against the Cubs, even with that wind blowing out, I have no real issues with it. 10,000, 9,700, totally playable. Justin Steele, same thing on the other side of that game, 9,200, 8,200. Seems very playable and downright cheap on the DraftKings slate. Luis Severino, playable against the Rangers, 9,000, 8,300. That said, kind of prefer the offenses in that one. Chris Bassett against the Red Sox. Projects well, perfectly playable, 8,700, 8,500. Looks like Chris Bassett, right? We know there are blow-up spots from time to time. I don't love the Red Sox as a target for him, but by and large, he's pitched pretty well this year. He had one big blow-up, and every other game has been 4 runs or fewer. Handful of decent strikeout performances. Typically pitches deep into games. So there's believable upside for Bassett. Nestor Cortez in Yankee Stadium on a hot day going up against a really good Orioles team. I think there's plenty of room for Nestor to succeed. I just don't know for sure that you need him here. 8,200 on FanDuel if you wanted to go to it, I think is perfectly fine. If you wanted to use him with some Yankees bats and like double stack and target the win and the upside for that and everything, it's perfectly fine to do, and he is cheap, so he'll help pay for that Yankee stack. But I don't know that he's necessary. Alec Marsh is an interesting one. You can see he projects out slightly higher on FanDuel. If we resorted by FanDuel, he'd be here. 8,800 over there. Perfectly reasonable price for a pitcher going up against that Oakland team. 7,600, downright cheap on the DraftKings slate. One of the better value options on the slate. Actually, probably for pitchers 8,000 or below, that's your top option, I'm going to say. Until you get into, like, if you want to cut it from 7,000 after that, then it's probably Spencer Schwellenbach. But yeah, that's a really interesting option, Alec Marsh, for 76 on DraftKings. You could do good things with that price. If you took him and Fromber for just 93, kind of like that combination, obviously. You took him and your favorite of Justin Steele, Luis Severino, or Chris Bassett and put those guys together as a cheap combo, kind of like that too. Aaron Savali does have, if that Minnesota game plays, Aaron Savali does or did have the talent to beat that Minnesota team. Got enough strikeout upside on the right day, showed more of it at the end of last year than he has this year. 77, 78, it's a dart. He's not incorrectly priced for the struggles. That said, I think I'd rather, oddly, go to Walker Buehler at 78, 73 if I'm looking for a good pitcher at a value discount kind of a price in not necessarily the best environment. And Walker Buehler fits that bill up against Colorado. There's no reason to expect that he couldn't beat that Colorado team over 6 innings, even in that ballpark. You just got to avoid the Coors effect, right? And Walker Buehler certainly has the experience and the talent to do that. So it's a fair price for that option as a dice roll value play. Tobias Myers against the Angels, 79.65. Very, very cheap at 6,500 on DraftKings. That'll be an interesting one to consider when we get to it. What's he done lately? Not that we want to rely on recent performance. I typically like looking at the depth, the innings here. So you went 8 2 starts ago against Detroit. 5 strikeouts, 3 walks, just a 1-hitter. And then follow-up to that was 6 innings against Toronto, struck out 4, gave up a solo home run, 3 hits. It's pretty good in those 2 starts. Several bumpy spots in short outings throughout the season. But a couple short outings where he was effective and pulled anyway. So certainly worth considering at 65. That might be, I might have to recalibrate that statement that I made before. I think it's probably, if you're looking 7,000 or less, I still think Alec Marsh, if you're talking about 8,000 or less, is probably your best DraftKings value at pitcher. But if we're looking 7,000 or less, then it's probably Tobias Myers against the Angels. I don't fully trust him, but that's a very cheap price. I think that is better than Spencer Schwellenbach against the Tigers. It's close, though. Michael Lorenzen against the Mets. Don't love the pitcher. 85, 8,000 is perfectly fair for where he projects. Just kind of prefer the offenses in that one again. Schwellenbach, I do think, is a good value. Very, very low price on FanDuel at 6,900. Makes a lot of things work. And if you're considering people in that price range, then you're talking about Albert Suarez against the Yankees in Yankee Stadium, Jonathan Canning against the Astros, Casey Mize against the Braves, Griff Canning against the Brewers, or Austin Gomber at Coors against the Dodgers. So you're basically going to Spencer Schwellenbach against the Tigers every single time you're in that price range. Pays for 2 very high-end stack combinations. Hogan Harris against KC, 73.68. We're getting into like meh kind of territory. Meh, but playable, I guess, as a just cheap dart. But I greatly prefer the KC side of that. Suarez against the Yankees, I want no part of. Jonathan Cannon against the Astros, I really don't want any part of. Casey Mize, again, I feel like he's underperforming his arsenal. Grades out really well by stuff. Plus, it just doesn't find strikeouts, doesn't put hitters away, but has had his spots this year, has also gotten just completely destroyed in spots this year. It's very cheap against a underperforming Braves team. Again, if you're looking for very cheap darts, he's another 500 below Tobias Myers. I think it probably goes like 1, 2, and then 3, but with 3, you're really just praying. Griff Canning is a no for me against the Brewers. Austin Gomber's a gigantic no against the Dodgers, of course. Oh, Lone Wolf was ill as well. I had a cold myself yesterday, Lone Wolf. Steven Lubowitz points out that the Jays have no Bo Bichette. That is true. They just put him on the IL. Steven rooting for rain and chaos. Mama says he continues to own the month of June. I'm taking him every day, so won't bother spamming the chat, but everyone should do it. Kyle Schwarber for home runs. Wow, it's a beautiful parlay. Mamba parlayed Schwarber for 4K payout, total hits, home run, Phillies win. I saw our old friend Eric Lindquist tweeted something where he turned 25 into 400 on a Schwarber 2 home run bet yesterday. Ballsy play. Ooh, sounds like Lone Wolf's had it worse than me. Yeah, I just had a weird... It's definitely was. I mean, I don't think it was the flu. It was the flu. It was certainly a very light flu. But I was just dying, like coughing, which is you can still hear in my throat, and I might break into cough at any moment during the show. And then I was just dying from sneezing, stuffy nose, and I felt like I had a fever. But it's also like it got really hot, so I had the air conditioning all up high. But it was one of those like sweaty under the covers nights. But then like you take it off and you're freezing, even though it's not that cold, kind of a thing. So I think I had a light fever. But it was just really, it was 24 hours. It was, through Sunday night and part of yesterday. And feeling better late last night. Lono says I didn't play any DFS, so you know it was bad. Yeah, I didn't do a show yesterday, so I felt at least that lousy. But I did have projections and stuff up. Glad you're feeling a little bit better and back with us, Lone Wolf. So, Yankees lineup come out yet? Padres, the Rangers, the Tigers, the Twins, the Mariners. Got a bunch of lineups in. But not the Yankees. So talking about this one, starting with the pitchers, again, it is a fair price for Nestor Cortes, but on a slate with a bunch of different pitching options, I don't know that we really want to tangle with the Orioles in Yankee Stadium. He is a lefty, so he does have a little bit of advantage over the lefties and the guys targeting the short porch in right field, like Colton Cowser. I wouldn't necessarily say the same about Gunnar Henderson, although what are Gunnar's splits? Pretty sure Gunnar's just been awesome against everybody. So 18 of his home runs have come against righties, but he has hit 4 against lefties, and he's also slashing 291, 424, 557 with a 266 ISO and a 179 WRC plus against lefties. So I will say that Gunnar is perfectly fine against same-handed pitching. And then you've got a couple switch hitters in there. So you got a heavily right-handed lineup outside of Cowser. I was actually wondering if they were going to roll with Cowser today. He's gotten a fair number of days off against lefties, is why I say that. He's hit 2 home runs against same-handed pitching as well, but he's slashing 191, 264, 340 in that split with a 149 ISO and a 75 WRC plus compared to a 227 ISO and a 133 WRC plus against righties. So Cowser is maybe a little bit lessened in that spot, but a lazy fly ball to right field on a hot day in Yankee Stadium from that hitter could certainly get out. You can see the contact profile, even though it doesn't necessarily hold up against same-handed pitching. There is still a home run threat there, and the Orioles know what they're doing, and they put him in the lineup. At the top bunch of righties are switch hitters and Gunnar Henderson, so it's a really threatening lineup for Nestor. He's good, though. I mean, 3.59 ERA, a 4.03 xFIP, 22.7% strikeouts, 5.1% walks. Has allowed some home runs and some hard hits for sure this year, and he's a fly ball pitcher, so that's, again, part of the issue. If he gives up this kind of contact to a guy, even like Colton Cowser, lefty-lefty, that generates that kind of contact, even if it's not hit perfectly, it could get out in right field at Yankee Stadium. So a little bit problematic of a matchup. You can see Stuff Plus doesn't love Nestor. It doesn't fully account for everything that a guy like Nestor does on the mound. But he's in no way elite. He's just good. He's like a 3-4 starter. So again, he's a fair price. You can throw a few darts in 150 lineups. You can play him a few times if you want him. I do think that if you did that, pairing him with the Yankees upside and taking some shots at that as like a kind of full Yankees stack is kind of an interesting way to consider it. But I don't think he's necessary by any means. Albert Suarez, 7,400, 7,000. 1.61 ERA and a 4.25 xFIP. There's a big difference between those two numbers. That's over 7 starts, 44 and 2/3 innings. Does have a 20.6% strikeout rate, 12.2% swinging strikes, but just a 24.2% CSW. He's only given up 5.5% barrels, 37.5% hard hits, 89 miles an hour of exit velo, and not many home runs. I think that's probably one home run. But he is a fly ball or trajectory pitcher at 16.3 degrees. So with the home run hitters in the Yankees lineup, I definitely think that that wasn't a laugh. I was trying not to cough. I definitely think this could be the spot where Albert Suarez's nice start to his season kind of turns around. He's made a handful of relief appearances. He's made 7 starts, and he's 7 relief appearances. Several of which were for a couple of innings. I don't really see any reason outside of that he's cheap and like you just bolt him in, but the Yankees are drawing good numbers against. It's a hot day in New York. Why are you targeting the Yankees on a slate with a lot of options? It just doesn't really make sense. So it's more about the bats in this one to me. If we're going to the Orioles, I think Jordan Westburg off the top for 5,000, 3,200, especially on FanDuel, 32. Seems like a very fair price for a guy with 11 home runs and 6 steals, a 226 ISO. Grading runs 38% better than average, fitting him at 3 different positions where he's not a bad option at any of those positions. A lot of times with a guy who's got second base, shortstop, and either outfield or third base eligibility, a lot of times I'll be like, I want that guy at second base. And that's where I would normally plug Jordan Westburg in. But if I'm stacking Orioles with another expensive team and a cheap pitcher, let's say, or like I'm game stacking this one, and I don't take Anthony Volpe from the Yankees side. Maybe it's not a game stack, whatever. Point being, if I need to get cheaper at shortstop, where I've made the decision, all right, I'm not playing Gunnar. I've got another shortstop I've got a good second baseman. I need to get cheaper. I can consider a lineup from the Orioles that doesn't use Gunnar, and Westbrook isn't a bad option at shortstop. That was really clunky. My brain's not fully here today, I don't think, with the sick. The fever did a number on my brain, my ability to talk this stuff through. I can feel it already. It's gonna be a rough show. Point was, Westburg is playable at all 3 of those spots. Second base and third base is perfectly fine on DraftKings. Adley Rutschman, one of the best catcher options in the sport. 14 home runs, a 184 ISO, 30% better than average for run creation over 300 plate appearances. He's tremendous. 5,600, 3,500. He could be a couple hundred more expensive on both sides. 45, 3,000 feels like a good price for Ryan Mountcastle against the lefty that can definitely give up some power to a guy with a 48.5% hard hit rate, 9.6% barrels, 11 home runs, and a 199 ISO already this season. Mountcastle's a little streaky, a little bit up and down, but he is underpriced for this spot in Yankee Stadium. Gunnar Henderson, 6,300, 4,300 on cross sites, one of the most expensive players. Totally worth it. 22 home runs on the season, a 314 ISO, a 170 WRC plus, rivaling the numbers from the 3-hitter on the other team. Ridiculous season so far from Gunnar. Top shortstop option on the board. Santander, 46.29, good price for him. 17 home runs for him. Another good power bat in this lineup, drawing a 9.72. And you can see, again, the power upside for the Orioles is clear and it's real across at least the top 5. And then Austin Hayes, probably underprojected in that number. I'm not sure exactly what would be causing that to be a little bit low outside of, what was his season like last year? 16 home runs last year, 16 the year before. Yeah, I guess the production in the last 2 years was down a little bit in the home run department. But he's a good bat. He's a decent hard hit rate. He barrels the ball at a reasonable clip and does have good right-handed power against the lefty. So Hayes is in consideration again if you need a cheaper Orioles bat. Jorge Mateo down to 236, 281, 441 now. 4 home runs, 11 stolen bases. Still has a 205 ISO, but we're down to a 102 WRC plus. It was another one of those things where we had like 90 good plate appearances, and then he started to rapidly, immediately cool off. Colton Cowser, I think I've talked about enough. I do think he's playable here. It's not ideal, but just put the ball in the air toward right field and hope for the best. James McCann, catcher in here just for his platoon value, does have power against lefties, but a lot of that is the memory of. He's got 2 home runs, 206, 219, 314, a 108 ISO so far. 108 ISO so far this year, over 105 plate appearances. Playable, but not a priority by any means. You're certainly not skipping Adley Rutschman for him. On the Yankees side, could be interesting. We'll see what they do with the lineup. We're expecting that this kid Ben Rice is getting called up. I think he got called up. Let me see. See if they actually put the transaction through. Yeah, it looks like they put the transaction through. So Anthony Rizzo's hurt. He's going to be out for a few weeks. This kid Ben Rice is a first baseman who has been really hot in the minors. Power hitting lefty. So it makes sense that he'll get his first shot tonight. But the Yankees could definitely just come out and put Ozzie Cabrera at third and DJ LeMahieu at first and not really have an issue. So we'll see what they do with that spot. The kid's not on either slate, unfortunately, unless one of them added him. If so, let me know. But if he's in the lineup, that does put a power hitting lefty into that spot. And with Anthony Rizzo's struggles this season, you could certainly say that it's like an equivalent value as far as like making the lineup work or driving in runs or whatever. We just don't get it as a DFS option, at least as of when I put the salary sheet in. So just a weird spot in the middle of the lineup stack-wise. But you get a complete top end, top 5, which is really where all the quality is, plus Glaber down the bottom. Austin Wells is always interesting. Volpe is cheap at 4,400, 3,000 across sites. 6 home runs, 15 stolen bases, a 323 on base. Creating runs 10% better than average. We've certainly taken a dip over the last, let's say, like 100 plate appearances. The counting stats are definitely down from last year overall. The hard hits and the barrels are definitely down. He's having a more complete season, I think, but a lower end season, if that makes sense. Like, he's doing more things well, but it's not necessarily adding up to, like, great fantasy production. But as I've said a number of times, all he has to do is get on base ahead of these two guys, and you're doing good things. 18 home runs for Juan Soto, 26 home runs for Aaron Judge, a 386 ISO for Judge, 277 for Soto, 90% and 107% better than average for run creation. Easily 2 of the best players in DFS, 2 of the best players in baseball. Easy to get to. Alex Verdugo, 43, 3,000, very playable here. 9 home runs, lefty in Yankee Stadium against a mediocre righty. But again, Suarez hasn't given up many home runs this year. He's been decent at inducing medium contact, hasn't given up many barrels, and just a 0.56% home run rate. I was looking that up before. That is 1 home run that he gave up all the way back on April 28th to somebody on the Athletics. But that doesn't really track. It tracks with his KBO performance over the last couple seasons, but it doesn't really track with who he was previous to that. So, yeah, maybe there's a noteworthy change there, and he has successfully done it over his 7 starts and his handful of relief appearances. But those notably did not come against this Yankees team. So really like the upside for some power here from the Yanks. And I do think Verdugo could be a sneaky, cheap option for that. Giancarlo Stanton is the home run pick of the day at 12.17. You've got Judgy at 16.27 and Juan Soto at 13.98. You can kind of see my point there as far as the power goes. Glaber, 4,200, 2,800, 6 home runs, 4 stolen bases, 85 WRC+. plus. He keeps like surge, cool, surge, cool. Like, it's not even full roller coaster because he doesn't really get like a full-on like 2 weeks of playing really well. He's just been like gradually ticking up a little bit, but it's not really completely showing in the numbers right now. I do think he's playable. 4,200, 2,800 for his upside is very cheap, but it's been rough this year for Glaber. Austin Wells for 32.25, very playable at catcher. You know I like that bat. 20.9% strikeouts is up a little bit from last year, but it's still decent. 10.8% walks. The barrels are down from last year, and the hard hits are down a little bit from last year in his 139 plate appearances so far. But considering that he did that with the bat last year, and he's relatively low strikeout, a lot of balls in play. Last year he was a lot worse drawing walks, so that was also interesting because he was making a lot of frequent contact and he was making good contact when he made the contact. But I think there's decent, left-handed home run upside here from the catcher. He's cheap, 2,500 on FanDuel, 32 on DraftKings, easy to play. DJ, another option that's just easy to slot in at third base or first base, wherever you need him on FanDuel, 3,400 on DraftKings at third. Just a piece in this Yankees lineup. If he happens to hit higher up in the lineup today, depending again on what they do with this spot, he becomes a little bit more interesting. Over 57 plate appearances, he has not been good. He's got a 0 ISO, a 56 WRC plus, no home runs, no steals, and a 188, 304, 188 triple slash. So you just got to take it on faith that there will be good games to come from DJ. And like a lot of this looks like it has. A lot of this looks, reasonably close to that. So, not that he's been good in these last two seasons, but that's compared to the old DJ LeMahieu. He's been okay in those seasons in an overall 2,400 cents, like DFS play price-wise. So it's Yankees bats, Orioles bats, Nestor if you want him. Albert Suarez is kind of off the board for me. Skip the Red Sox by accident there. Red Sox. Doesn't look like we've got their lineup either. So a couple pitchers to talk about here. Bassett, again, 3.56 ERA this year with 4.09 xFIP. Not bad. 22% strikeout rate, 9.4% walks. The mediocre strike throwing numbers, a 1.40 whip on the high walk rate. Gettable for power, but not bad. 2.05% home run rate on 7% barrels. Medium kind of contact. This is very Chris Bassett. He eats innings. He's never going to project out poorly, but he's never anybody's favorite option to get to, me included. He's going up against a pretty decent Red Sox offense. A lot of good lefties in that offense. I don't love the spot. It's a lot like Nestor. He projects out slightly better than Nestor, but it's a spot that's a lot like that. I don't feel the need to go to Chris Bassett a lot today. I do think he's playable. He projects just fine for the money. I don't think he's incorrectly priced on either side. Strikeout high of 8. He did that against, surprise, Seattle, back on April 9th. He had three games in a row. He broke the streak in his last start, but before that he had 3 games in a row with exactly 7 strikeouts. Gave up just 4 earned runs across the 3 starts. Earned run high of 7 on the season, a couple 4-run games. Everything else is 3 or fewer. It's been effective. On the other side, Tanner Houck, 10-3, 11,000. Again, it's just really that price bouncing off the strikeout rate. Not necessarily the threat of the Blue Jays, though they've been better for run creation at the top of the lineup. It's really just a price thing on a slate that's got a lot of really effective prices. If I could pay that big a discount to get Framber against the White Sox, I think I gotta do it. Some of these guys down through here are good like mix and match options. I do think that renders Houck a little bit under-owned for his talent, for his performance this year. It's just a question of can he find a few strikeouts against this team, and we're obviously looking at a pitcher who can eat innings as well. Both of these guys have the potential to go 7 plus. Bassett went 8 2 starts ago, 7 strikeouts and earned run, 2 walks, 4 hits. Houck went 7 in 2 starts. He's gone at least 6 in 5 starts in a row, and 3 of those he went 7. Strikeout high along that stretch was 9. His strikeout high for he's struck out 9 3 different times this year. Strikeout high for the season is 10. It's actually the first time he's facing this Toronto squad this year. Against a somewhat comparable Cleveland team, he struck out 4. That's going all the way back to April 23rd. 2 earned runs, 5 hits. It was an okay start. Walked 3. One of his more like, that was an okay start games of the year. Earned run high of 4 on the season. Gave up 3 a couple of times. It's been terrific. He's got a 2.08 ERA with a 2.87 xFIP. So there is a gap here, but this is still a phenomenal xFIP. 24.5% strikeout rate. He doesn't walk anybody. Doesn't allow any base runners. Hasn't allowed many home runs. That's 2 home runs all season in 14 starts, 91 innings. Keeps the ball on the ground, 4.7 degree average launch. Very difficult to hit home runs against. You can see the impact that it's having on the Blue Jays' home run numbers. So there's nothing about it that says go to Blue Jays bats. I do think the Red Sox are more playable against Bassett. And if you want to take shots with the Blue Jays, they're certainly going to be low owned. But I don't think it's a great spot to do so, just given the combination of factors playing against him. He's been good at limiting runs. He's been good at finding strikeouts. Not elite, but good enough to punch a few of these hitters out. He's not giving up walks or putting guys on base. He's not giving up power. So he's taking a number of different things away from this Blue Jays team. So it doesn't look like a great spot to stack them. If you're going there, it really is all about the top 4 or 5 hitters. And maybe at the bottom Ernie Clement. Spencer Harwitz at the top, 3,300, 2,500, 333, 419, 370. Creating runs 28% better than average over 31 plate appearances. Decent profile as a hitter. Last year in 44, he hit a home run. Davis Schneider, 4,400, 3,300 multi-position, second base and outfield on both sites. Has 9 home runs, a 201 ISO, 115 WRC+. Playable right-handed bat if you're stacking this team up. Vladdy Guerrero, 4,700, 3,100. Continues to be really, really cheap for Vladdy Guerrero. Has third base eligibility still on FanDuel, but he lost it on DraftKings. You can see the ridiculous contact that he makes and the frequency of contact. He's got a good walk rate. He draws a ton of walks. He gets on base like crazy. But he doesn't strike out, and he mashes the ball when he connects with it. He's got 7 home runs this year, a 120 ISO. That's disappointing, but 284, 373, 404. Creating runs 27% better than average. I feel like he should be, underpriced, sure, compared to, our previous expectations for this player. But maybe like 34, 35, and like 5 to 52, somewhere in that range. So I think he's underpriced from being underpriced. Like he's down further than he should be. Varsho, 4,300, 3,000, 11 home runs on the season, 7 steals, 233 ISO. Capable lefty bat, but again, how very difficult to hit home runs against. Then we get to Justin Turner, who's been scuffling. 5 home runs, a 102 WRC+ is keeping him alive, 322 on base. Doesn't really strike out and still draws walks, but you're not getting much premium contact out of Turner. You're not getting much quality out of Turner. I just got to read this update. Oh, it's a whole article. Why would you? It had an ellipsis at the end. It said amid a flurry, I assume flurry of moves about the Yankees calling up Ben Rice. I just don't know what the flurry of moves is. I wanted to see if there was anything else that was impactful. Nope. They end the article by saying the same thing that I did, that they could easily go with Cabrera at third and DJ LeMahieu at first. So Turner is playable, but it's really rough, and then you get the compound of Tanner Houck being really good. So I don't love that. From there, 2,100 across sites for Addison Barger. Lefty bat, no previous experience. Do we have him? He's 24 and change. He's their 4th ranked organizational prospect if you're going by graphs. He's got power upside. Had 8 home runs in AAA before they called him up this year. He only hit 9 home runs in AAA last year and 397 plate appearances. 23 in High A and Double A in 2022. Feels like they've got him. Feels like traditional scouting has him a little high for his. Well, actually, maybe not. because his ISOs are really good. He just hit a lot of doubles. Yeah, he had a ton of doubles those years. So if you're stacking Blue Jays and you need a cheap bat, especially with the multi-position eligibility, Addison Barger may be a consideration. But again, it's a bad spot to stack Blue Jays. Alejandro Kirk, I prefer Danny Jansen. Isaiah Connor-Falefa is not a great bat. He can put the ball in play, which he does. 270, 312, 377, 98 WRC+. That's what you get from IKF. Ernie Clement, 2,500, 2,200. 280, 300, 432, 3 homers, 3 steals, over 132. Has been performing well. I think he's a playable bat as a wraparound. I think he's a playable bat just in stacks if you're going down the lineup, skipping a few spots. He's also cheap with multi-position on FanDuel. The Red Sox are the team that I prefer. Let's see if I've blabbered long enough about the Blue Jays to get the Red Sox lineup. Doesn't look like. I think it'll be pretty realistically like this, though. Jarren Duran off the top, still reasonably priced, 52.36. He's got 5 home runs and 17 stolen bases. His creative runs 23% better than average while getting it on at a 346 clip. Hits the ball very hard from the left side of the plate against a righty who, again, can be vulnerable to hard hit balls. Hasn't really been so far this season, but it's an interesting enough spot. And Manuel Valdez has a lot of power. 12.4% barrels, 45.4% hard hits so far this year in 142 plate appearances. It's resulted in 5 home runs and a 195 ISO, which is good, but his overall triple slash 211, 262, 406, 80 WRC plus, not so much. Obviously has some growth to do, but if you're just looking for a cheap bat from the left side at second base, ideal positioning in this Red Sox stack that you can throw at Chris Bassett, to help average down the cost of, say, Duran, O'Neill, and Devers behind him, I think that's a pretty terrific option. O'Neill and Devers, 2 great power bats, 14 home runs apiece on the season, 275 and 273 ISO, 140 and 151 WRC+, 534 and 555 slug. They're having very similar seasons outside of the batting average. Devers has 59 plate appearances. Brain dead today. From which he, part of which was when he knocked Tyler O'Neill out in the outfield. Gained the advantage there. 55.38 for Devers still feels cheap to me. 13.7% barrels, 49.4% hard hits. Dynamite third base option. Connor Wong, 3,600, 2,900. I don't know why they haven't raised this price on DraftKings. I really don't get it. Where you have to play catchers, 18.6% strikeout rate. He's got 5 homers and 3 steals. He was making better premium contact last year. It was a bit better of a power bat last year. But he's slashing 332, 395, 455 with a 139 WRC plus over 210 plate appearances now. Can we not get his price a little bit higher than 3,600 on DraftKings? That is cheap. 2,900 on FanDuel is cheap as well. Masataka Yoshida, very good bat. Over 109 plate appearances. He missed a lot of time. Over 109 this year. He's been mediocre. 330 on base is good. Just a 94 WRC plus. Last year, though, over 580 in his rookie year in Major League Baseball. He was an NPB veteran. 289, 338, 445. Creator runs 9% better than average. Hit 15 homers and stole 8 bases. He was pretty effective last year in a full season. 3,400, 2,600. It's very cheap for that talent. Doesn't strike out, puts a ton of balls in play. It was hitting the ball harder last year, so there's more upside to come for sure than what we've seen so far from Yoshida. That's an excellent option late in the lineup. Romy Gonzalez, if he's in the lineup, a playable mix and match part. Nothing more than that. Dom Smith, not a hitter I really love, but he's a lefty, so they'll probably be in the lineup instead of Jose Bobby Dahlbeck. Sedan Rafaela, 3,300, 2,800. 4 positions on FanDuel, 2 on DraftKings. Very cheap. 8th home run of the year, I think, last night. He hit a home run too last night, right? O'Neill hit 2, Devers hit 1, and he hit 1? I think so. Either way, 8 home runs, 9 steals, 81 WRC+. Plus. Hasn't been great, but does have any given slate counting stat upside. Tanner Houck, if you can afford him. Red Sox bats. Chris Bassett. Not that much separation between those two. And then if you just feel like throwing a wild hair low ownership team at Tanner Houck, then I guess the Blue Jays are your guys. But they're really not a high priority. Not very much on the board for me. Tigers and the Braves, I think we do have these lineups. Interesting one to talk about for value pitching here. Casey Mize against Spencer Schwellenbach. Obviously, one of these teams is projected for one of the highest totals on the board. And it is not the Detroit Tigers. Braves at 5+ going up against Casey Mize. The reason I was saying that Mize is kind of underperforming what his talent might be, what his arsenal looks like, look at the Stuff Plus number. He's got 3 pitches that grade out well above average by Stuff Plus. He's got a 4.43 ERA, but a 4.24 xFIP. He hasn't been bad on the whole over 13 starts, 65 innings. He's been gettable for premium contact, exit velo, some barrels in there. Not terrible on the launch, not bad at all for home runs. Just a 15% strikeout rate with good stuff is problematic. A 1.46 whip with a 6.6% walk rate tells me there's a lot of hits, maybe some BABIP against. Just a 7.5% swinging strike rate and a 24.5% CSWs. For whatever reason, just not finding strikes with a good arsenal. So it's just kind of weird output from Casey Mize. But in a could he give me 5 cheap innings on DraftKings kind of a sense, I do think he could. I don't think it's completely crazy. Maybe you get 6. He's gotten 6 a few times this season. Went 6 in his most recent start. Struck out 4 Nationals. 1 earned run on 4 hits. 1 walk. Quality start, but no win. Gave up 5 runs, 3 of them earned. Just 1 strikeout. 2 walks over 5 1/3 against Milwaukee in the start before that. Only went 4 innings against the Red Sox at Fenway. Only gave up 2 earned runs, but he struck out 4 and walked 4. Faced 19 hitters. 3 overall runs on 5 hits. Guess he was just pitching inefficiently or maybe got into trouble at some point. The start before that, 4 1/3, he gave up 3 earned on 8 hits, struck out 0 and walked 2. These are the problematic starts. Against the Royals was his big meltdown of the season. He gave up 6 earned runs on 9 hits in that one, struck out 2, walked 0. That was just an inning and 2/3. Ouch. But 2 6-inning starts before that one. Struck out 6, gave up 2 earned runs against Miami. Struck out just 2, but gave up just 1 earned run, 5 hits against Houston. Bumpy one against the Yanks, but did find 6 strikeouts. So, again, I just think there's believable enough upside for 6,000 that you could roll the dice on DraftKings. I like Spencer Schwellenbach on the other side better on FanDuel despite the $100 discount. It's just a much better matchup for Schwellenbach, and I think between the two, he probably is the better of the 2 pitchers on, like, raw talent, if you just could. It's difficult to say because he has like no major league experience and did not pitch in AAA, so it's unfair, I think, to Casey Mize to say that. But I think he probably, 10 years from now, you look back, he ended up the better of these 2 pitchers. That's one way to put it. So I slightly prefer that option on FanDuel. At 7,000 with a $1,000 difference between the 2 on DraftKings, that's a big, big difference where there's not that much more believability in Schwellenbach. He's got a 6.32 ERA with a 4.49 xFIP over his first 3 starts and 15 2/3 innings for one thing. Yeah, he's one of their top prospects. Yeah, in AAA this year, AA this year, just 2 starts. So he was in high A earlier than that. So it's 8 starts across 2 in AA and 6 in high A. He had a 26% strikeout rate in high A, 38.6% in AA. And then last year in high A, he had a 30.4% strikeout rate. That was over 13 2/3 innings. A 19.6% strikeout rate in low A, which notably does not compare to Major League Baseball all that well. That was in 13 starts in 2023. So obviously we've rapidly accelerated Schwellenbach to the major leagues just for shortage of pitchers here on the Braves. but he's also 24. He just turned 24. So it's not like he's crazy young to have made it to the show. He's actually, what he was a little bit old to be pitching in low A last year. 23. 24, high A, double A. If you're 24 in double A, you better be on your way to triple A or the show, but that's where he was a few weeks ago. And again, it was only 2 starts and 13 innings in double A. They were successful starts. In the show so far, he's got a 17.6% strikeout rate, but he's induced an 11.8% swinging strike rate, which is encouraging against the Tigers lineup that's got a 23.8% strikeout rate overall. I do think there's a little bit of believability to Schwellenbach's upside. So for 6,900, he just makes things work on FanDuel, projects out a handful of points higher than his opponent. For the $1,000 difference on DraftKings, there is a difference in projection, obviously, but given that's a $1,000 difference, I'm willing to take some shots on Casey Mize over there. I would consider Schwellenbach from the bargain bin. Like I said, I think it was 1, Tobias Myers against the Angels for 65, 2, 2, Casey Mize against the Braves for 6, and then Schwellenbach for 7. You could go 2-3 in either order in that. But value pitching on both sides. I do think you could play Tigers bats against Schwellenbach. I definitely think you could play Braves bats against Casey Mize. Out of everything in this game, Braves bats against Casey Mize is the priority. That's the go-to spot. You can see 2 monster marks for home runs there, both over the magic number for Marcell Ozuna and Matt Olson. Ozuna's got 20. He, at least as of the other day, was leading the National League in all 3 Triple Crown categories. Having a monster season, keeping this Braves team alive. Olson, 11 home runs. Numbers are definitely down, but a 208 ISO, 50% hard hits, 11.7% barrels. Not where we want him, but the quality hasn't been that far off the mark either, and believable at any given slate upside. In the leadoff spot, they've got Jared Kelenic for 32.27. He's had an okay 188 plate appearances. 6 home runs, a 107 WRC+, 309 on base. Not ideal for the leadoff spot, but an interesting enough lefty bat up there. Ozzie Albies underperforming overall this season, 263, 18, 400, just a 103 WRC+, 5 home runs, 4 steals. Way off the mark for Albies. 4.8% barrels is basically half the barrel rate that he had last year. 31.7% hard hits is way down. He's been off, but he's still very playable. 55-35, there's not much discount for the underperformance. But you definitely play Ozzie Albies more often than not if you're stacking Braves here. Austin Riley, another guy in this lineup who has underperformed this season, but seems like he's coming on lately. 11.5% barrels compared to 13.9% last year. Definitely a dip. It was higher, even higher than that in 2022. But it's just like Matt Olson, it's reasonable. That's a good barrel rate. It's just not where we expect Austin Riley. The hard hits are right in line with where they're supposed to be. 6 home runs. He's hit a few of them in the last 2 weeks. 158 ISO, got some work to do across the board, but we're up to a 102 WRC+, 52-32. He's cheap on FanDuel. He's, usually you would see him in like the 55 to 57 range, I guess, on DraftKings, so he's a little bit less expensive, but I wouldn't call 5,200 for his underperformance this year necessarily cheap. I do think he's cheap on FanDuel. Travis d'Arnaud for 38-28, power hitting backup catcher, over 165 plate appearances, 6 home runs. Back to the backup role where he's comfortable popping into the lineup and hitting 2 random home runs on any given slate. So watch out for Travis d'Arnaud today. If you're stacking Braves, certainly a playable option, especially on DraftKings at 3,800. Makes him very interesting. You're not playing him that often instead of Matt Olson. You could certainly go Olson, d'Arnaud in FanDuel lineups, but typically he's going to get left behind on a lot of FanDuel lineups. That does make him a little bit interesting there, though, because he'll be under owned with power upside. So a consideration for sure. 11.7% barrels. Adam Duvall, also very, very good premium contact numbers. 6 home runs in 174 plate appearances is good. Just ignore the rest of the numbers that are in that over here. Just don't look at anything but that. That's all we really care about with Adam Duvall. Forrest Wall for 25, 2,000. Dead min on FanDuel, I guess, just makes him a little bit interesting. Orlando Arcia for 33-26 is playable at shortstop, but he's another guy who's really underperforming. Not getting on base, not hitting for average. The power's way down this year. The premium contact is down. Well, the barrels are down a little bit. Hard hits are actually right in line. Strikeouts, put more balls in play. That's where the on base went. Not walking nearly as much. I think Garcia is a playable option at the bottom. Wall is now, wow, he's 28 already, 28 and a half. He was once upon a time like a reasonably well thought of prospect. But we're going back to excuse me, 2018. And he was more like a hit and speed kind of a prospect. Does have a ton of minor league stolen bases in his career. Stole exactly 52 bases in each of in AAA in 2022 and 2023. But that's really all he is. You know, cheap, dead min price on FanDuel, $2,500. Get him on base a couple times. Maybe he steals a bag. He already stole one in his 4 plate appearances. So that's what you're looking for from him. But maybe a contributor that way. On the Tigers, Matt Vierling, 9 home runs on the season, a 195 ISO, creating runs 9% better than average. Pretty decent hard hit profile out of Vierling. He's affordable, 4,000, 2,800, outfield and third base eligible. Not a bad option to lead off a Tiger stack. Winfield Perez, 3 home runs, 5 steals, a 103 WRC+. Kind of mediocre numbers. Playable, but not a priority. Riley Green, the top priority bat in this lineup. 10.05 in the home run model, 4,900, 3,100, 14 home runs on the season, 227 ISO. I think Green is a playable one-off option. 14.6% barrels, 46.5% hard hits. I don't know that he'd be all that popular in that sense. I don't think a ton of people are going to be stacking up the Tigers here. So just kind of a guy to keep in mind. Hey, I need a mid-priced outfielder. It's not going to be people's first thought. I'll tell you that much. 14 homers on the season is a great total so far in 305 plate appearances for him. Just needs help in this lineup. Mark Canha for 43.29 on base. Little bit of power, but more here for just like on base and correlated scoring skills. But a playable part in stacks. That's what we're looking for in a lot of ways in stacks. Gio Urshela, 32.25. Not really all that much of a hitter. Him and IKF fall into similar buckets for me. Colt Keith, underperforming his talent and expectations so far this year at 227, 275, 304, just a 65 WRC+, 3 homers, 3 steals. I sent him back to the minors in the Dynasty League a few weeks ago, and I think maybe the Tigers should consider doing the same thing. That said, there's only so many of their top prospects that they can churn through at the major league level. Justin Henry Malloy, 2,900, 2,500, 2 home runs, but mediocre triple slash, 206 ISOs, good, dead on average for run creation so far in his brief 42 plate appearances. He's made very good contact in that limited sample, 11.1% barrels, 50% hard hits. McKinstry, Carson Kelly, mix and match plays at the bottom of the Detroit Tigers lineup, even against a probably mediocre, minor league pitcher. You're kind of stretching things there. Braves bats. Value dart pitching on either. Braves bats, Riley Green. Value pitching on either side, Tigers bats. In that order. I do think all 4 corners are at least somewhat playable. Oh, Yankees lineup's out. Rice is in it. I think it's exactly what we had on. Let's see. Opie Soto. Yeah, it's the exact lineup we had up there. Rays and the Twins. This is the game that was severely threatened by rain. Just keep that in mind. I do think it is an opportunity potentially to get Pablo Lopez if this game does play at lower ownership than he should be at. But it's one to keep an eye on. Let me see if there's any updates. Does not look like there's updates, but we do have the Rays lineup, so I'll grab that real quick. Hit the like button if you're out there. Subscribe to the channel. Check out our pals over at acemind.io. They do a great job. They've got an optimizer tool, a sim tool. If you use promo code rotoscouts, all in caps, you get 20% off your first month over there. This is a shouldn't look at it from where I copied it. I should look at the actual lineup they announced. The Diaz, Brandon Lowe, Jose Paredes, Josh Lowe, Randy Rosanena, Richie Palala, nope, Jose Caballero. Rortvet, and Johnny, that's right. Johnny with no H. So, again, Savali has really struggled this season for a pitcher that I expected to be good this year. 23.5% strikeout rate is fine, but he was pitching in the high 20s after arriving in Tampa Bay last year. So it was kind of a disappointment that he dipped. This has come up a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but still a little bit disappointing there. More in line with his career average. It's not a terrible strikeout rate if that was the only thing going on. 5.20 ERA, but a 3.84 xFIP is encouraging. 1.33 whip, and all this power given up, though, is not encouraging. 9.2% swinging strikes, 28.5% CSW, mediocre numbers there. So he's been really, really gettable. Some of that is showing through for the Twins. Not a ton. I don't know that the model's fully caught up to the Twins yet. It's got all the updates in and everything. But I feel like they could be a little bit more highly projected here. Or maybe it's just balancing against Savali's quality over time. Again, we don't want to just consider these 14 starts, some of which have been good for Savali. We know that he is a talented guy. But I do think he's targetable with a Twins offense that's been pretty good. You can see some very good WRC plus numbers in here. The ridiculous 180% better than average that Royce Lewis has been over his 47 plate appearances. Got his price way, way up now. He's got 7 home runs in 47 plate appearances, a 561 ISO, a 951 slug. He's been amazing. Obviously, that's going to come way, way down, but he's been very good and is very good. 10.24 in the home run model. Trevor Larnach, 9.23 in the home run model. He's got 7 on the season to match Royce Lewis in 101 plate appearances fewer. Top of the lineup, Willie Castro in the leadoff spot again. 261, 350, 416. As long as he's getting on base, he's interesting up there. He's got speed. He can steal bases. He can correlate and create runs. Multi-position on both sites is interesting for a cheap price. Max Kepler, a lot of lefty power, 4,200, 3,100. Definitely very cheap on DraftKings. That is a notably cheap price for Max Kepler on DraftKings. 261, 323, 426 on the season with a 165 ISO. The premium contact is down, certainly from last season. It's more in line with 2 years ago. But we know he's got upside for this kind of premium contact, and he's been a 20-ish home run guy. 24 last year, just 9 the year before. So I guess it's a little concerning that the premium contact looks like that. How many plate appearances was that? Yeah, it was full 446. He had a bad 2022. I don't remember that. But he had a good 2023. And he's having an okay 2024 so far. 5 home runs. The ISO's down for sure. We need to see a little bit more from Max. But doesn't strike out a ton. Puts the ball in play. Hits it fairly hard. 261, 323, 426 is a pretty good line. Carlos Correa, surging. Up to 308, 370, 507. 47% better than average. 8 home runs on the season. He's been dynamite. Still really cheap on DraftKings. 2 really cheap bats there for their talent. I don't know how DraftKings hasn't caught up on Correa yet. 46, he should be 5,000 plus by now. FanDuel's got it right. 3,600. That's right where he belongs. 46 on DraftKings is way too cheap. Jose Miranda, 3,600, 2,800. A playable part, 283, 2473. Totally believable from this hitter. 7 home runs, a 192 ISO. Doing exactly what he typically does up there. Low strikeout, a lot of balls in play, fairly well struck. Line drive trajectory hitter, but does have 7 homers so far, so definitely interesting for the cheap pricing. Byron Buxton for 4,000, 2,900. Hasn't really been there over 191 plate appearances, but there's got to still be any given Slate upside at worst. 6.50 in the home run model. It's accounting for everything that's gone on and the diminishment in the talent, but he's very cheap as well. Ryan Jeffers for 44.29, 12 home runs from the catcher spot, 248 ISO. You can take that from hitting 8th for 4,400. Austin Martin for 28-24, a playable part at the bottom. A little bit of speed so far. He's got 4 stolen bases. Reasonably effective triple slash over 91 plate appearances. Going the other way with Pablo, 9,000 on DraftKings. He's cheap. 9,700 on FanDuel is cheap. He should be 10 plus over here. He should be significantly more expensive over there. This is very appealing. Up against a Rays team with a 25.4% strikeout rate this year. The same group of hitters, 23.5% last year. A lot of targets for Ks. Lopez, 26.3% strikeout rate. 5.33 ERA is rough. Both these pitchers rougher in the ERA department compared to the xFIP. You can see a stellar xFIP for Pablo. 5.3% walks, 1.21 whip is a mismatch, so there's some definite BABIP going on there. 13% swinging strike rate. He's elite at inducing swinging strikes. He's a very good strikeout pitcher. Was a little bit better for strikeouts last year, 29.2% strikeout rate, more swinging strikes, better CSW. You can see the results in the ERA, but the xFIP is very similar. Not impossible to hit home runs against. Fly ball trajectory, fairly good at limiting premium contact, but can result in some home runs when he makes mistakes. You can see 4.38 so far this year, part of the difference between the ERA and the xFIP. Has given up a home run in 6 straight starts. 2 of those were 2 home run games. So it hasn't been ideal for Pablo, but it's a very targetable Rays team. Team leader is Isaac Paredes with 10 home runs. Probably the best bat on this team right now. 281, 364, 62, 139 WRC+. He's only the best bat on this team right now because Yandy Diaz is dramatically underperforming this season. 102 WRC plus puts him 2 points above league average, but that's on a 259, 326, 355, 4 home runs, which is down from 330, 410, 522 last year, 22 home runs. And you will say, okay, he had a good year last year, but then you look the year before, 296, 401, 423 with a 146 WRC plus. Yeah, he only hit 9 home runs, but he was an elite run creator. He had an elite on-base percentage both of those years. It's 1,100 and change plate appearances of over 400 on base. And now he's down to 326. That is a bad season from Yandy Diaz. Bad half season so far. David Soto took this game out. Yeah, I don't think it's a terrible decision to just take it out early. It seems like it's got a lot of probability to be rained out. But I want to talk it through. One, because I just talk about this stuff and don't stop talking about this stuff. But for 2, I do think if it's not rained out, it does make Pablo interesting because I think people will take it out early, and he might go under-owned. So that's the only reason I want to really go through it fully, thoroughly. The one thing that Diaz is still doing like his old self is not really striking out that much. So not a great strikeout target there, not a great strikeout target here. Everybody else in the lineup, 23% or above. Plenty of strikeout upside for Pablo if he's on form today. You just got to trust a little bit in the underlying numbers in his track record as a very high-end pitcher. I think it's a very good spot if this game plays. If you run into the situation where it starts and stops, that could be also very problematic for pitching. So keep that in mind as well. A lot of risk here. Yeah, Hamilton got hurt. Hamilton hurt his side. So that Red Sox lineup is Duran, Valdez, Refsnyder, Devers, O'Neill, Yoshida, McGuire, Dom Smith, and Rafaela. Kind of a better. Well, you get the 2 lefties that I like at the top. You still got Devers and O'Neill and Yoshida in there. It's no Wong. That's the part that stands out. Downgraded catcher for the Red Sox. Everything else is all right. I don't love Refsnyder. You guys know that. So yeah, Hamilton, I believe it hurt his side. Mama's model says Cannon is going to get absolutely destroyed today. Curious to see what you think. Yeah, I think that's the case. Not a good spot for him. Yeah, Monty calling out Correa pricing. It's price still below Lindor and Tovar. It's a great spot. I do think the Twins are really interesting on DraftKings just because of how cheap they are. And that applies on FanDuel as well. It's just with Correa correctly priced there, you're going to him at a correct price and Royce Lewis more often than not at full price. So it doesn't play exactly the same as getting a super discounted Correa and a full price Royce Lewis does on DraftKings as your first two guys. Everybody else is similarly priced against the relative salary cap, but that Correa price makes a big difference on FanDuel. They're still a good value team with a lot of upside here on the FanDuel slate, but I think they play a little bit better, a little bit more strongly on DraftKings, particularly also because you're grabbing 5 of them. So it's an interesting full stack spot. Brandon Lau, a lot of power, a lot of premium contact, over 114 plate appearances, 194 ISO, 4 home runs, basically in line with expectations. He's always been a low average, reasonable on base guy, always been a positive run creator. You can see the barrels and the hard hits are where they're expected to be in a small sample of batted ball events. He's higher strikeout than he's been so far this year, so even more upside for some additional strikeouts for Pablo Lopez from him. Josh Lowe, 3,900, 2,600, 2 home runs, a stolen base over 82 plate appearances, was very good last year. 292, 335, 500, 208 ISO, created runs 31% better than average, hit 20 homers and stole 32 bags. You could say that about basically everybody on this team, that they were better last year, outside of maybe Isaac Paredes. But a playable part if you're targeting Pablo Lopez in a game that is probably going to be rained out. Randy Arozarena really underperforming his talent this year. 9 home runs, 7 steals, 178, 291, 326, 86 WRC+. Really rough. Jose Caballero has been really interesting this year. 22 stolen bases over 226 plate appearances. 250, 313, 368. Just a 101 WRC+. But the speed, the frequency of stolen bases makes him somewhat interesting. He's put a lot of balls in play this year. So kind of like the Caballero option if you're going to raise. Jose Siri, 3,400, 3,000, 8 home runs, 7 steals. Effective counting stats, a little bit of power for sure, very good contact profile. But you're not getting much else out of Jose Siri down the bottom of the lineup. Ben Rortvedt, a backup catcher talent. Johnny DeLuca, over 111 plate appearances, 2 home runs and 5 steals, and pretty bad everything else. If this game plays, it's Pablo Lopez up top, followed by the Twins bats, or you could flip those if you wanted to. Honestly, the Twins are that good a value option. And then just mediocre options on the other side, maybe some Savali for a cheap price. He's fairly priced for the underperformance here. Slightly here. The price doesn't necessarily reflect the quality that's revealed by the XFIP. So I do think Savali's playable. I'm just much more enthusiastic about Twins at value pricing. Giants, Cubs. As stated, this game has a 15-plus mile-an-hour wind blowing out to left center field. But you've got 2 pitchers who are pretty reasonably damn good at limiting home runs. Let's just look at these guys over the last couple of seasons. Starting with the home pitcher, Justin Steele. So far this year, a 2.86% home run rate. That's good. It's not filthy elite, but it's good. You can see he was better last year and the year before. 24 starts 2 years ago. He gave up a 1.56 on a 7.4 degree average launch with 3.9% barrels. Was very good at limiting hard hits and exit velo. Good at limiting hard hits and exit velo last year. Got up to a 9.3 degree average launch, 5.4% barrels. Slipped a little bit there over 30 starts, 173 in a third innings. Threw a lot more innings. So it makes sense that there were a little bit more happenstance in there to juice the numbers a little bit. But this is still fantastic. He had a very good season. 306, 332. 306 ERA, 332 xFIP, 24.6% strikeout rate. Matched the strikeout rate from 2022 exactly while cutting his walk rate dramatically. Made major strides last year. And this year, the strikeouts are down a little bit. The home runs are up a little bit, but nothing about this outside of the launch angle. It's a few fly balls over 50 in the third innings in 9 starts. The barrels haven't been bad. The exit velo and the hard hits are right where they're supposed to be. So there's no reason to believe that there's anything going on with Justin Steele giving up more power upside. So I like his ability to keep this team somewhat in check, despite the fact that the wind's blowing out again. If you're not hitting the ball in the air, I don't care that the wind is blowing out. And then on the other side, you've got one of the most elite ground ball pitchers in the game. Logan Webb, 97, 10,000, I think is perfectly reasonable pricing for him in this spot. There's no reason to believe that the wind would threaten him here at all. 2.5 degree average launch angle this year, 0.6 degrees last year, 3.1 degrees the year before, 1.40 home runs, 2.35% home runs, and then this year 1.06% home runs allowed. He gives up hard hits, he gives up some exit velocity, sure, but it's all on the ground. I just don't care that the wind is blowing out in this game. And I think Vegas sees that a little bit. Yeah, it's a high run total, but again, we see a lot of these games in Wrigley get up over 10, 10.5 when the wind is blowing out like this. They've got it dead even, so they see both pitchers as talented. 4.80 runs on either side. I think this is a game that could get overblown as far as the offensive upside. You can see, again, limitations in the home run model on both sides. Could the wind help create offense on line drives? You know, all of a sudden the ball floats a little bit and gets over the outfielder's head and lands at the base of the wall for a RBI double? Sure, of course that can happen, right? But the probabilities are that these two pitchers are going to be good at keeping the ball down and keeping the ball in the yard and keeping scoring relatively low in this game. 8,200, 9,200. Justin Steele is very differently priced across sites. He's a value option on the DraftKings slate against a gettable Giants team. This projected version of the Giants lineup, do we have the confirmed? Yeah, Labs is running slow today. Labs is running like my brain is running today. Ooh, Justin Verlander placed on the IL. Neck injury. Didn't realize he had gotten hurt. Doesn't look like we got we got the Cubs. And it's different. So, talking about the Giants lineup again real quick, or continuing the thought. They were striking out more last year with this projected lineup that we have in the model. So I do think there's strikeout upside on board for Justin Steele. I think at the DraftKings price, he's really interesting as like a mid-level type of a value option. Whoops, there's no E at the end of Seiya Suzuki. That was a typo. I didn't think there was actually an E there. My finger just slipped. I think it's David. Pretty sure it's David. Yep, David. All right. So, as I was saying, 25.5% strikeout rate for that same group of Giants hitters in this projected version of the lineup. We'll see what we get. And there's definitely interesting bats. Like Elliot Ramos has had a fantastic 156 plate appearances, especially the last few weeks. It's like 7 home runs in his last 14 games or something like that. He's got 9 on the season so far, 248 ISO, 179 WRC+, 404 on base. He's been absolutely terrific. He is also still really cheap on DraftKings. 3,900 on FanDuel, 4,300 on DraftKings. He's priced like a superstar on FanDuel, and he's priced like a cheap outfielder on DraftKings. Wake up, DK. FanDuel's pricing people better than you are across the board this year. Wilmer Flores, not a pitcher. God damn that other Wilmer Flores guy. Oops. I guess FanDuel just doesn't have him. It's not... What? Did I change it in the wrong spot? Changed the wrong one. So, yeah. If you are taking shares of the Giants, or if you're targeting the wind or whatever, that's a phenomenal price for Ramos on the DraftKings slate. Austin Slater at 3,000, 2,400, typically leading off against the lefty. 373 on base is an effective platoon option. He does get on base and create runs via correlated scoring. He's not a extreme individual contributor, but he can definitely click into a lineup. Probably a better option on DK where you can stretch to 5 than making him one of your 4 guys in this lineup. Certainly not a premier bat. He is cheap, though, on FanDuel. Patty Bailey for 3,700, 2,800. Definitely interesting to get a cheap catcher with power in that third spot in the lineup. 286, 360, 435. 5 home runs with a 130 WRC plus over 179. Doing good things with the bat this season. Matt Chapman, Wilmer Flores, Jorge Soler have made a living off of hitting the ball very hard against left-handed pitching and hitting home runs against lefties in their career. That said, all 3 guys, inconsistent at best this season. Soler definitely disappointing so far this season. Matt Chapman just kind of on the pace that he's been at the last couple of seasons with a disappointing average and a mediocre on-base percentage. Just 8 home runs, which flies in the face of his excellent premium contact. It's kind of like what he did last year. He's been the most effective of the 3. Soler probably the highest ceiling of the 3. And then Wilmer just kind of floating through the middle at a cheap price. Any one of those 3 guys could be one of the more realistic targets for home run upside from this team. You can see 5.39 for Soler, the highest mark on the team behind, or slightly ahead of Elliot Ramos, and then 4.96 for Matt Chapman. But again, it's a tough spot for me to believe that Justin Steele is suddenly going to get lit up for power here. Thairo Estrada, 3,800, 2,800, 9 home runs on the season. A playable part if you're stacking this team. He's certainly cheap for his talent. Mike Yastrzemski, 3,325. Another playable part, but lefty-lefty down lineup. Nick Ahmed, 3,100, 2,100. Mix and match option at best. On the Cubs side, it's just the matchup against Logan Webb. I like this Cubs team. I like nights against other pitchers. Tomorrow night, if somebody else is pitching presumably somebody else will be pitching for the Giants. Tomorrow night, when someone else is pitching for the Giants, if the wind is blowing out again, we'll probably be into the Cubs. But against Logan Webb, doesn't really play. Not in my opinion. I wouldn't take them in a dome against Logan Webb, so that doesn't really make sense. Of course I wouldn't take them in a dome against Logan Webb. It would be encouraging that the wind is blowing up, but whatever. I am so goddamn brain dead today. It's like the 4th thing that I've been like, Wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Anywho, Nico Horner off the top, 10 stolen bases, 332 on base. The stolen bases have gone up a little bit. The on base is hovering in the mediocre, or the good, but mediocre for him kind of range. I expect a little bit more on base. He's a correlated scoring option, 95 WRC plus, a little bit disappointing from Nico so far. He's cheap. You can play him at the middle infield, second base on DraftKings, both middle infield spots on FanDuel for a cheap price. Michael Busch, first and second base eligible on DraftKings, 4,300 over there. First and third base eligible, 2,600. He's cheap. He's got 9 home runs, a 195 ISO, 128 WRC plus. Cheap and playable with a good amount of premium contact from a lefty against a righty. But again, just really capped in terms of home run upside by what Logan Webb does on the mound. Cody Bellinger, 5,600, 3,200, has 9 home runs, 109 WRC plus. Looks a lot like Cody Bellinger, the good version of Cody Bellinger from last year and several years before that. Just a bad spot for a good player. Seiya Suzuki hits the ball very, very hard. 8 home runs, 5 stolen bases, 190 ISO, 11.4% barrels, 53.8% hard hits so far this year. One of the more, maybe believable offensive upside players, considering that taking a home run away from him doesn't necessarily cut him as much because he's got that ability to drive the ball. Not that the other players don't. But just maybe a little bit interesting if you're stacking Cubs. I definitely wouldn't leave him out. Ian Happ, 41.34. Very cheap on DraftKings for who Ian Happ has been over the years. 8 home runs, 6 stolen bases this year, but a 114 WRC plus because he's getting on at a 340 clip. He's also got a 12% barrel rate and 43.4% hard hits. If he's priced like that tomorrow on DraftKings, we'll be talking about Ian Happ, I can promise you. That's a really cheap price for his talent. 3,400 on FanDuel is roughly correct. You could go 32 because he has underperformed a little bit in his 282 opportunities this year. But 41 is cheap. 36 for Dansby Swanson, 26 on FanDuel. Both those prices reflect who Dansby's been this year, if we're being honest. 6 home runs, 4 steals, and 81 WRC+. Been a really down season for a very talented player over time. Still like the opportunity to bounce back. He's still hitting the ball very hard, 9.7% barrels, 43.9% hard hits. Just hasn't really come together, but certainly any given slate upside. P. Crow Armstrong, David Bote, whatever it is, Miguel Amaya at the bottom of the lineup. Everybody's cheap. Nobody's been all that productive. Crow Armstrong does have 12 stolen bases, but just a 57 WRC plus and a 260 on base. Not an ideal combination of talent and output there. And then the other two are replacement parts. I'm going to fly in the face of the wind here and say it's both pitchers up top. Probably Logan Webb, then Justin Steele, but you could play it the other way around because Steele's cheaper. Actually, yeah. I think it is the other way around. Considering how closely projected they are, they're next to each other. But considering the discount on Steele in the better of the two matchups, I'd rather face the Giants than the Cubs. I think I take Justin Steele, Logan Webb, Cubs bats, Giants bats. And to me, the bats aren't all that appealing. Monty makes a good point there. Ironic that Webb and Valdez, ground ball specialists, both pitching in Chicago on the same day, yeah. Mamba says, well, then I guess I'm playing on FanDuel today. What did I say that makes you jump to FanDuel? I know you're looking for the Astros spot. I think that's what, the next game up? Yep, next game up. Got to get through the Mets and the Rangers first. Luis Severino, pitching effectively, but not like high end. 3.12 ERA, but a 4.19 xFIP, a 9.3% walk rate, and just an 18.6% strikeout rate over his 13 starts. Just an 8.6% swinging strike rate, 23.4% CSW. Hasn't given up a bunch of power to have that big a difference in the xFIP and the ERA without giving up a bunch of home runs in there. That works the other way around. Chalk up another thing on the dumb thing said. What I said would make sense if the xFIP was lower and the ERA was higher. 105 marked by Stuff Plus, though. Still has good stuff on the mound, just hasn't really been booking the results. Going up against an underperforming but still very talented Rangers team, 83, 9,000. He's effectively priced. He projects out just fine. He's in the middle of the board. I think you can take the discount on DraftKings and play some shares. 9,000 on FanDuel is not ideal, but I think he's playable over there. In terms of quality starts, if you're looking at him on FanDuel, back-to-back quality starts, 6 innings in his most recent one against Miami, 8 innings against Washington was a good start. But just 4 strikeouts in that one, 2 strikeouts in the Miami game, gave up 7 hits in both of those games. It's more like he's getting by than he's been good. And this Rangers team is not really one that you want to throw a pitcher who's just getting by against. So he's playable at best. I don't think he's a priority by any means. Michael Lorenzen for 8,000, 8,500. He's got a 17.9% swinging strikeout rate on 9.3% swinging and 26% CSW. He's also got an 11% walk rate, which is pretty elevated. Flies in the face of the 2.86 ERA, but much more explained with the 4.62 xFIP underneath the surface here. Is another guy who's just kind of gotten by in some spots. 7 innings in his most recent start. He gave up just 1 earned run on 4 hits to the Dodgers at Los Angeles. Struck out just 2, walked 1. But obviously an effective start against the Dodgers. Earned run high on the season was 6. That came against Oakland of all teams. 5 earned runs allowed to Cincinnati in another game. Outside of those 2, he has not given up more than 3, and he only gave up 3 one time. That was against the Braves. So, I mean, he's been making it work, but there's a lot of noteworthy things to not necessarily believe in for Michael Lorenzen. So, 8,000, 8,500 against a reasonably good Mets team. A lot of talented hitters in this lineup. A lot of good run creators in this lineup. Good amount of power in this lineup. I don't love the spot for either of these pitchers. As I think I said at the top of the show, I just prefer the offenses in this one. I prefer the offenses in this one, even at lower Vegas totals, than I do in that one. More gettable pitchers in this game. That matters to me more than the wind. Oh, good. We got both of these lineups. Frankie Lindor off the top, up to 12 home runs and 11 steals, a 189 ISO, creating runs 16% better than average, still fantastic premium contact profile, still doesn't strike out. 3,500 is correct on FanDuel, 4,700, still cheap on DraftKings. Not quite Carlos Correa, but still cheap. Brandon Nimmo, 11.3% barrels and 48.6% hard hits. The numbers are down a little bit for Nimmo this year. 8 home runs is fine. 5 stolen bases is fine, but it's down a little bit. 356 on base is, I believe that's down a little bit, but it's certainly a good on base percentage. Yeah, 363 last year. The run creation is down slightly by like 6 percentage points. 160 ISO this year versus a 193 last year. Just been a little bit more limited this season. But 4,500, 3,000 for his lefty bat against Michael Lorenzen is not a bad option in the 2 spot in this Mets lineup. 187 plate appearances for JD Martinez. He's got 8 home runs, a 220 ISO. Just doing JD Martinez things. Phenomenal premium contact profile. 4,200, 3,400. This is, again, cheap. I'm sorry. JD Martinez, after all these plate appearances, should not be that cheap. It's not like this is some flash-in-the-pan hitter that was like, all right, they called him up from AAA, and like, yeah, he had a good 120 plate appearances, but in there were 67 that weren't good at all, and like, we see the downside. This is JD Martinez. He's one of the best power hitters of the last generation. That is way too cheap. The Mets are a good value team today, too. Up and down. Nobody above 5,000 on DraftKings, not Pete Alonso at 4,800. That's silly. I know Pete Alonso doesn't have a good batting average. I don't care that Pete Alonso doesn't have a good batting average. He's got 15 home runs. He's got a 225 ISO, a 124 WRC+, 9.90 on the home run model today to lead the team. Give me some Pete Alonso for cheap. They're cheap on FanDuel as well, but they're all like medium cheap. The discounts on DraftKings are bigger with this Mets team. Mets plus Twins with some expensive pitching might be an interesting angle on DraftKings. Starling Marte, 4,300, 3,200 across sites. Very good hard hit rate. 281, 335, 424. 7 home runs, 12 stolen bases, a 121 WRC+. Back to the effective version of Starling Marte after a year off. Did very, very good. Also cheap on DraftKings. Mark Vientos is 3,700. Over 107 plate appearances. Dude slashing 302, 364, 521, a 219 ISO, 5 home runs. He's basically the example that I was making before with JD Martinez, where it's like, all right, that's a really good 107 plate appearances. What more do you have for me, kid? I'm not raising your prices yet. I think they're being stubborn about it with this player. I think maybe he doesn't slash 302, 364 on the front end, but the power's real. Mark Vientos is a power hitter. Like there's nothing unrealistic about the premium contact, the home run output, the 219 ISO. Should be more expensive. It's more believable to keep him cheap than the other guys, but he's even cheaper than those other guys relative to the talent. Francisco Alvarez, 3,300, 2,800. I know he hasn't been good in 78 plate appearances. He was wildly inconsistent last year, but he did hit 25 home runs in 423 plate appearances with a 228 ISO. As a $3,300 catcher on DraftKings, where you have to play the position, against a pitcher who gives up a 40.5% hard hit rate this season, 3.04% home runs. Last year, similar with more barrels, more exit velo. Year before, it was reasonably good that year. Cheap Mets. Jeff McNeil, Harrison Bader. I prefer Bader between the two. I think they're both playable parts, but they're both highly skippable. Bader gives you more in terms of counting stat upside. 4 home runs, 9 stolen bases, a 106 WRC+. He's an effective player, but he's overrated in terms of his hitting ability. McNeil is more a hit tool BABIP specialist. If you're going to Rangers on the other side, which I think is totally viable against Severino, you got a few stars at the top of the lineup. No Adolis Garcia today. Marcus Semien, Corey Seager, a couple of middle infield stars. 5,100, 5,300. 11 home runs for Semien, 14 home runs for Seager. But, like, there's no real reason to say that these two guys are not equally underperforming this season as, like, him and any of these cheap Mets. So it's weird that they're still as expensive with everybody else, like, priced down. I know that they're very, very good players, but I'm saying the way that they seem to be pricing things, I think they're basing a lot of their pricing just on pure batting average. And I know hits matter a little bit more compared to power, a little bit more on FanDuel. But that seems like a dramatic difference for 10, 20 points of batting average. Anyway, these are effectively cheap prices for these two players. These are correct. 37, 35, arguably a couple hundred cheap. 112 WRC plus for Semien, 123 WRC plus on the other side of the middle of the field at shortstop for Corey Seager. Both excellent. Neither strikes out a lot. Josh Smith following 4,200 shortstop and third base eligibility on both sides for a fair price. He's slashing 294, 384, 436, having a tremendous year. Not a great power bat, not a great overall masher of the baseball. Not a great power bat. I'd already covered that. Capable lefty bat for a fair price. Nathaniel Lowe, 37.28, still cheap. 253, 348, 333. Not his best 204 plate appearances, but we've got a lot of history that tells me Nathaniel Lowe's a better hitter than that, with a little bit of power from the left side. At worst, he's getting on base. It's a very playable part. Wyatt Langford's been pretty bad. 1 home run, 6 stolen bases, dramatically underperforming expectations. 73 WRC plus. Travis Jankowski can get on base and steal a bag. He's not really done that over 110 plate appearances this season, just a 282 on base. 5 stolen bases to go with that in that amount of plate appearances, I guess, is okay. He's cheap. He's capable of providing correlated scoring. Jonah Heim, 3,800, 2,700, a little bit of catcher pop. Ezekiel Duran and Leody Taveras, two of the more playable guys from the bottom of lineups. Neither one's been as good this year as they were last year, but they're both fairly priced. They play multiple positions. Actually, Taveras is just an outfielder. Duran plays multiple positions, but you can mix and match your way to shares of both of those guys from the bottom. But again, not as appealing as they were last year. I'm going to say cheap Mets bats. Rangers bats after that. And then probably Severino on top of Lorenzen. Lorenzen's the least playable spot here. I don't really like that option. You can throw a few darts at it at 8,000 on DraftKings, but FanDuel especially, I don't really see the Lorenzen upside. Sevy, I do think, is worth a few shares. Not many, though. Not a priority. Here you go, Mamba. Let's see if we got these lineups. We do. Fantastic. One more time, hit the like button. Hit the subscribe. Jump into the Discord if you're not in there. A lot of good folks hanging out in the Discord. Always entertaining to have Seth in there reacting to the first inning for like every game. Telling us which teams are going to be the nuts, which teams are going to be a bust. So you're saying he's not Kevin Moss? Oh, no. Mamba built all his lineups around Alvarez and he's not playing. Yeah, that kind of sucks. So that is a downgrade for this Astros lineup. I don't think it takes their quality away by any means against Jonathan Cannon, but it certainly takes their best bat out of the lineup. It's a lot less appealing. That is not the ideal version of the Astros. It shows what the Astros think of Jonathan Cannon, I think. Yeah, Larry said the rip pitcher after the first, yeah. Yeah, Paul, he ripped Skeens yesterday, yeah. Ooh, Mama's going to be dropping a 100K home run parlay in the Discord today. All right. In that case, let me link people to the Discord. If you're not in the Discord already, here's a link. Hop on in, hang out. So Framber, it looks like a pretty spectacular spot to roster Framber Valdez. 3.99 ERA on the season with a 3.46 xFIP. pitching a little bit better under the covers. The strikeouts have gone away a little bit compared to where he's been in years past. 24.8% last year, 23.5% the year before, on slightly better swinging strike numbers, similar CSW numbers, just not putting hitters away at the same clip this year. 18.6%, down like 6 points. But overall, pitching pretty well. Negative 1.6 degree average launch angle, so we're back to just ground ball after ground ball. 5.5% barrel rate. Has given up a couple of home runs. Gives up a lot of hard hits and a lot of exit velo, but again, it's on the ground. I don't really care. Stuff Plus loves him. One of my top-end pitchers who's been higher priced than this in seasons past, probably on the back of the additional strikeout upside. But going up against our favorite target in the league in the Chicago White Sox, with a little bit of wind apparently blowing somewhat in. It seems like it's blowing like across the field, but if you had to angle it, it would be angled in a little bit more. Seems like a really gettable spot for Framber Valdez. Projects out great, top of the board, 9,300, 9,400 across sites. Dynamite option, probably going to be pretty popular in this spot, especially if you lose Pablo Lopez in the other game. But very, very high-end option. I would not play Jonathan Cannon against the Astros. I don't think. Can I justify it? I'm going to guess on that. You could. 7 innings of one-run ball with a home run allowed, 7 strikeouts, but that was against Seattle, so we can't really count that. 3 innings of relief work were clean against the Red Sox. He struck out 4. That was a good appearance, wasn't a start. 5 innings against the Rays. He got pounded, gave up 4 earned, struck out 5, walked 2, 2 home runs allowed. Gave up 6 earned runs on 9 hits over 3 2/3 to the Twins. Struck out 5, walked 1. Obviously a meltdown there. First start of the year was somewhat effective, back on April 17th. I guess on the back of I'm not even going to try and justify it. It's still, even with the diminished lineup, it still probably doesn't pay to play Jonathan Cannon here. I don't think it works out all that often. 23.8% strikeout rate looks good. 4.56 ERA, but a 3.20 xFIP is obviously a good ratio there. 5% walk rate. 11.6% swinging strike rate even in the small sample has been good. Just even with no Jordan Alvarez, no Kyle Tucker in this lineup, John Singleton hitting 5th, Mauricio Dubon hitting 6th, Victor Caratini, Jake Myers, Trey Cabbage. It's a really diminished lineup, but what they still do is not really strike out. So there's really no upside for Jonathan Cannon. Depends on where you want to go with the Astros. I'm curious to see see if we got a new line in this game. Is that 9, 5.23? Oh, come on. Yeah, still 9 runs. 168, 154. So it came down to... So the Astros lose like a 10th of a run on the back of no Alvarez. I'll update that again later. If you're going to Astros bats, despite the Vegas downturn not being as extreme, it is a pretty big downturn taking him out of the lineup here. But Altuve is still terrific at the top, 5,300, 3,900, 299, 350, 460 across the triple slash, 132 WRC plus, 11 homers, 10 steals. Jeremy Pena, 282, 318, 381. Alex Bregman with a little bit of power upside. He's up to 9 home runs, a 162 ISO. Dead on league average for run creation is good to see. 237, 300 still has a lot of work to do to make the triple slash look pretty, but has really rounded more into form. So those 3 at the top of the lineup are all playable parts. Pena and Bregman are pretty cheap on both sites. Altuve is correctly priced at 39 on FanDuel. Arguably could be 200 more on DraftKings. Jainer Diaz is pretty cheap for a talented catcher, hitting 4th today. 3,900 on DraftKings. Slashing 260, 288, 410, 7 home runs, a 150 ISO. Hasn't been great, but had a really great stretch early in the season. A lot of any given slate upside, given a 50% hard hit rate and believable premium contact in the samples from years past. Very low strikeout, also low walk. So a ton of well-struck balls in play for that price at a mandatory position on DraftKings makes him really appealing. I tell you what the Astros are now, actually, is a comparable value stack to like the Twins and the Mets, because now everybody's cheap in this lineup. So you're obviously not getting the usual quality that you would get from the Astros. You've got a lot of reasonably good players, at least at the top here, for cheap prices. You get Mauricio Dubon, who, if nothing else, puts an absolute ton of balls into play. He's also slashing 301, 326, 422, and creating runs 13% better than average. He's nobody's idea of a DFS superstar. 3 home runs, 2 steals. But he's at worst a playable part. He's also got triple position eligibility on FanDuel for 26. 33 in the outfield on DraftKings is a little bit more of just another outfielder type. But just buying some balls in play for a very cheap price if you're stacking this team. I probably prefer him to John Singleton, even though Singleton's got more power upside. He's got 5 home runs, a 115 ISO, 26% strikeouts, 41.4% hard hits. Reasonable lefty power bat, at least to throw against a bad righty, would keep Singleton alive. But you probably get more you definitely get more consistency. You probably get more probability of scoring out of Dubon, where you probably get more of a high ceiling out of John Singleton on the right day. Caratini's also got a little bit of pop at the catcher position for $2,900. That's not a bad option, obviously positionally blocked here, but making this move for Caratini a couple of times if you're building a bunch of Astros stacks, Mamba, making that move for Caratini a couple times over Jainer Diaz could be difference making. 4 home runs in 110 plate appearances, a 190 ISO this year. 43.7% hard hits is down from 44.7% last year, but right in line. 8% barrels is slightly up over the last 2 years, but you can see he's been a player who, in his part-time roles, has had a very good hard hit rate over time, does not strike out all that much. A lot of well-struck balls into play with some home run upside. Could get interesting for the much lower owned of the cheap catchers on this team. And you save $1,000 from Diaz. Don't get me wrong, I prefer Diaz. I prefer the cleanup hitter to the 7-hitter just in general most of the time. But that's not a bad value pivot if you need it. Jake Myers, 6 home runs, 6 steals on the season, 108 WRC+, perfectly playable. More just another outfielder, but playable in that role. Trey Cabbage for 25-21, over 34 plate appearances, has a home run and a steal this season, 90 WRC+. Last year, same output, over 56 plate appearances. Mix and match option at best. The White Sox are so off the board for me that they're almost not worth talking about against Fromber, but they will be contrarian, so if you wanted to throw that dart, more power to you. The priority bat in that lineup every day is Lubov. 4,900 is cheap for him on DraftKings. 3,500 is more correct on FanDuel, but it could be more expensive. That said, over 77 plate appearances, where it's just 186, 265, 14. The power output's been great. 7 home runs in 77 plate appearances with a 329 ISO and a 108 WRC+. Just needs more time to round into form for average and on base and everything. Some stolen bases will come with that. He's a star. Everybody else in the lineup is, flawed at best. Paul DeJong has 14 home runs and a 240 ISO. He's probably the next best DFS option in this lineup. But a 240, 289, 480 slash line. 10.8% barrels and 43.9% hard hits. You're just buying them for home run upside against a pitcher who's very difficult to hit home runs against. Andrew Vaughn, okay contact profile. It's turned into 9 home runs, a 234, 289, 391 with a 156 ISO. Underperforming his contact for several seasons now. Tommy Pham is a very good player. He's probably the actual second best player in this lineup. 287, 346, 406 this season, a 116 WRC+. Just doing Tommy Pham things. He's cheap. He's reasonable. One of the more believable guys to succeed against Framber Valdez here. Lennon Sosa, Andrew Benintendi, Corey Julks, Corey Lee, Danny Mendick. That's a string of pretty unplayable players, guys. Everybody except for Corey Julks over 97 plate appearances has been below average for run creation. Several of those guys significantly below, the guys with bigger plate appearance samples. Nobody has more than 4 home runs. There's a few stolen bases apiece. The average batting average for that crew is 230. The average on-base percentage for that crew is 275. The average ISO is 131. Everybody's cheap. Nobody has good home run upside. There's a lot of strikeout targets in this lineup. That's the other thing for Fromber. 18.6% down this year for sure, but like we saw, higher in years past, going up against a 26.1% strikeout rate this year, 23.7% last year. Tons of upside here, not all that much here. Fromber, way, way up top. Diminished Astros lineup, still on the board now, just more as a value play. Really, for me, it's nothing from the White Sox. Coors Field. We do need to talk about Walker Buehler. Typically, we can just say we don't want to talk about pitching here. Really talented pitcher, has not fully found it in his comeback yet. He's made 7 starts, 4.64 ERA with a 3.90 xFIP, a 19.7% strikeout rate, but just a 6.1% walk. Not really inducing many swinging strikes yet this year. He's given up a bunch of homers in his brief season. At least 1 home run in each of his last 4 starts, with a 2 home run game against Cincinnati at Cincinnati mixed in there. Only 1 game on the season where he didn't give up a home run. I remember talking about this last time. That was another game against Cincinnati. That one was in Los Angeles. He struck out 7 in that one. It was his best start of the year. Had another 7 strikeout game against this Colorado team in Los Angeles last time out. Gave up a home run, 3 earned on 6 hits, and that was in LA, not Colorado. So you can see the downside. But for 7,300, 7,800, I think all that downside is priced in. And I do think there's upside for Walker Buehler to go out there, throw 6 clean innings, beat this team pretty handily, find a few strikeouts along the way. He is a talented pitcher. He's been diminished for sure. But he's talented. And this is a Rockies team that is not all that great. 26.6% strikeout rate for this confirmed Rockies lineup. 27.8% for the same group last year. At the top of the show, I did say there's a string of hitters in this Rockies lineup that I kind of like now, though. And I stand by that. Apologies to Charlie Blackmon, the grizzled old veteran at the top of the lineup. It really begins here. But Brenton Doyle, Ezekiel Tovar, Ryan McMahon, Michael Talia, Nolan Jones, Hunter Goodman is not an uninteresting stretch of hitters. If they had Eleodris Montero in here, hitting 8th where Jake Cave is instead of Alan Trejo, down in the 9 spot, that would be even more interesting. But this is a really interesting group of hitters for this Rockies team now. I can see these guys actually getting kind of, good is a strong word, but like better, particularly in home games next year as these players grow a little bit, if this is in fact, their go-forward lineup. There's a good amount of power there. I know several of these guys are below the Mendoza line, by the way. I know I sound a little bit crazy when I'm talking about this. But I think there's a lot of good power bats here. There's a lot of premium contact in this group, with Nolan Jones underperforming in his in his 120 plate appearances this year. A lot of premium contact in there. So Buehler's in no way safe, but I do think in terms of playable pitchers at Coors Field, he's playable, and he's cheap. He's a reasonable value option in like a dart throw kind of a sense. Obviously, you're going to the Dodgers against Austin Gomber, and you're not playing Austin Gomber against the Dodgers. I don't care. Anybody who wants to make an argument for it, feel free to go tune into their YouTube channel. I'm not doing it. 16.7% strikeout rate, a 4.10 home run rate. He'll be contrarian, I'll give you that. He's cheap, I'll give you that, but not at Coors Field, not against the Dodgers. Come on. He had, let's see. Last time he faced this team, he gave up 2 home runs, 3 earned on 5 hits, lasted just 3 innings, struck out 2, walked 3. That was in Los Angeles. Peak on the season was a 6 strikeout game. Went 8 innings in that one at Oakland. Yeah, I can't find any good hook to even try and sell Austin Gomber. So it's Dodgers bats all day. If we want to start at the top of the Dodgers lineup, let's see if I got the confirmed version in. We do. Shohei Ohtani, Will Smith, obviously one of the league's best players at the top of the lineup. followed by one of the league's best catchers. No Mookie Betts, going to be out for a minute. But it does diminish their lineup, but they're still absolutely elite, and they're playing at Coors Field. You do have the version of the lineup that has Miguel Rojas, Enrique Hernandez, Miguel Vargas, and Chris Taylor all in it down the bottom, so there's definitely some diminishment through there, but a lot of quality through here still, and these guys are at least any given slate capable. Ohtani's got 19 home runs and 16 steals with a 601 slug at 286 ISO. He's created a run 78% better than average. Super expensive, but it's Shohei Ohtani at Coors Field. I believe that's the highest home run mark on the slate, or maybe the second highest, and he's got the highest overall projections on the slate. Will Smith, tremendous catcher bat, 11.1% barrels, 44.4% hard hits, terrific triple slash, 133 WRC plus, 10 home runs, 10.86 in the home run model. Freddie Freeman, back up to above 300, 302, 412, 504, up to a 201 ISO, 10 home runs. Remember when I was saying that Freddie Freeman wasn't far off the mark and wasn't actually struggling or didn't deserve to be priced down at all? Well, at least he's at Coors Field, so he's priced back up. But I think the numbers are responding and improving back up toward where they're supposed to be. And again, he was never far down. He was still having a very, very good year. Teoscar Hernandez, 6,417 home runs at 242 ISO, has been a terrific power bat for them. Andy Paez for 4,300, 3,400, probably not priced highly enough for a Coors Field game. Considering the 10.5% barrel rate, 44.8% hard hit rate so far this season in Coors Field, even if he's not hitting home runs, it's just a gigantic ballpark. Actually bookmark that. I wonder if I can find it. As usual, this will depend on which Twitter handle I bookmark this from. There was a good oh, by the way, the challenge system is coming to AAA next week, which I think is interesting. Probably means they're going to do it in the show before too long. I probably don't. It's in the other. I marked it from the other Twitter handle. Oh, here's the Elliot Ramos, though. Elliot Ramos, the past 14 games. Remember I said I thought it was 7 home runs in 14 games? That's where I got this number. Over his past 14 games, 404 average, 478 on base, 7 homers, and 18 ribbies. Pretty good little stretch for the player. So what I was looking for was somebody sent out a tweet that I just thought was interesting. It was the total square footage of playing surface for all the different parks in baseball, and just looking at Coors Field on one extreme and the Astros Stadium on the other extreme, just staggering difference. But the point there is, Coors not only has the thin air effect and so on and so forth, it's just a gigantic ballpark. So a guy like Andy Paez, even if he doesn't hit a home run, just a really well struck ball. There's a lot of doubles and triples in Coors Field as well. 7 homers for him on the season, a 151 ISO, 107 WRC plus, and a terrific premium contact profile in his 218 plate appearances. Rojas, cheap enough, multi-position eligible on both sites, over 121 plate appearances, slashing 292, 339, 460. He's actually been pretty decent for them this year. It's been a lot of up and down performance from him over the past couple seasons, but 129 WRC plus has been pretty effective. Enrique Hernandez and Chris Taylor have not been effective this year. The worst season out of both of those guys, which is why it's noteworthy that Rojas has been kind of good, and Miguel Vargas over just 23 plate appearances has at least been somewhat effective, because these two utility guys have been just awful, and we expect a lot more from these two guys. Over time, each of these guys, in his role as a utility player in real life and a multi-position guy for cheap pricing for DFS, has been far more effective. They're playable. It's Coors Field. They're cheap. They're probably mandatory to build out a full Dodger stack to have like one of these bottom 4 guys, just because of how cheap they are and how they make things work up here. But Hernandez and Taylor have been really rough this season. Taylor, as indicated by his 9 WRC plus. Going to the Rockies side, as I mentioned, that stretch of hitters is very appealing to me. At the top of the lineup, 4,800, 3,400 for Charlie Blackmon, 266, 335. He's still getting involved a little bit, but he's 4 points below average for WRC plus. So if he's not actually creating runs with his on-base percentage, then what are we doing here? It's a little bit weird to see a decent on-base and a subpar WRC plus like that. Brenton Doyle, 4,300, 3,300, 5 home runs, 18 steals. A playable part for counting stat upside with a little bit of premium contact upside. Saw a little bit more power out of him last year, running a little bit more this year. Also below average for run creation overall, though, despite the quality. Has moved up and down the lineup a few times. An effective player at a cheap enough price. Ezequiel Tovar, 11 home runs, 4 steals, a 199 ISO. 12 home runs for Ryan McMahon. 5,200 for the shortstop, 5,100 for the third baseman. Both priorities on DraftKings, 37 and 35. They're effectively priced on FanDuel for the seasons that they're having. They've both been good. 108 WRC plus for Tovar, 112 for McMahon. The top 2 priority bats probably in that lineup. Talia, 4,400, 3,000, has 5 home runs in 92 plate appearances, but he's sub Mendoza. Over 120 plate appearances. Nolan Jones has just 1 home run and 3 stolen bases, and just a 54 WRC plus with a .094 ISO, and sub Mendoza at 198. And then Hunter Goodman, over 81 plate appearances, 5 home runs, also sub Mendoza. So you can see that both of these guys, with the home run totals and a minimal amount of plate appearances, are mashers. 260 ISO for Goodman, 212 ISO for Talia. Excellent premium contact. And Nolan Jones was absolutely that guy, plus stolen base and average upside last year. In 424 plate appearances last year, Nolan Jones went 20-20 and slashed 297, 389, 542 with a 245 ISO and was 35% better than average for run creation. In no way do we write off Nolan Jones based on some underperformance across 120 plate appearances and then an injury. So an excellent trio of power bats here. Really interesting options to pair with the 2 priority bats. And then another one of those, pair with types up here. Jake Cave, Alan Trejo at the bottom of the lineup. Kind of afterthoughts. Cave's not bad. 254, 312, 342. A 70 WRC plus, though. Trejo, a negative 45 WRC plus over 53 plate appearances. Thanks for your contribution, Alan. Really wish they had Montero in that lineup. Dodgers bats. Call it a tie between Walker Buehler value and Rockies bats. Like I said, Buehler is very talented. The price is right. It's just the idea of 3-4 runs against and just ruining the DFS value of the play with a lot of other interesting options on the board doesn't make it all that appealing. And there's just something about that little stretch of Rockies there. So Dodgers bats, Rockies bats, Walker Buehler, Austin Gomber not on the board. Brewers and the Angels. Let's see if we got the Brewers lineup in. We got the Angels lineup in. Doesn't look like we have the Brewers yet. Grab the Angels. Well, hang on. I don't know why I've been holding this coffee cup. I mean, I know why, because I wanted to take a sip of cold coffee. I guess I didn't know why I hadn't done that yet. Angels, bats. I should actually put the confirm lineup in, though. Appreciate you guys tolerating the brain deadness today, I gotta say. Shiny Renifo, Taylor Ward, Willie Calhoun, Logan O'Hop, Brandon Drury back in the lineup. He was in there yesterday. Zach Neto, Moniak, and Joe Adele. They got it right. So the lineup I actually wanted was the Brewers lineup because I really like that spot against one of our favorite targets, Mr. Griff Canning, on the mound for the Angels. 3.98% home run rate on 42.9% hard hits, 91.1 miles an hour of exit velo, and an 8.2% barrel rate on a 14.4 degree average launch tells me that he is vulnerable to the home run, which we already knew. We've been targeting Griff Canning for home runs. He used to be a little bit better at finding some strikeouts. He had some effective starts over time, but that's kind of abandoned him this year as well. Just 15.3% strikeouts, 8.3% walks, 4.76 ERA with a 4.99 xFIP. Really has not been good at all. There's no reason in the world to play Griff Canning, even if he's cheap. I just don't think it works out for you at 5,500 against this Brewers team that has been pretty good this year. Has some home run threats in the lineup. We'll see whether William Contreras plays. He's questionable to play. Questionable. It's not a baseball designation, but you know what I mean. He's banged up. We'll see whether he's in the lineup. But even if he's not, there's a lot of quality on this team. So I greatly prefer the Brewers lineup and their high-end run total. I don't think Griff Canning's playable. Tobias Myers, though, is definitely playable. Going up against a really gettable Angels lineup that has a 21.1% strikeout rate this year, but had a 23.8% last year. He's at 22% over his 40 and 2/3 innings in 8 starts this year, 3.76 ERA with a 4.20 xFIP. There's a little difference there, but it's not crazy far off. Stuff Plus obviously doesn't love him. He's given up some home runs, 9.7% barrels. Non-tragic hard hit mark, but right on the line for exit velo of where we want it. I'm not saying Tobias Myers is good. It's more like he's believably effective against a bad team at a cheap price. So I think there's, at worst, value dart upside at 6,500 on the DraftKings slate, as we've talked about a few times already on this show. 7,900 on FanDuel. I think he's playable, but it's probably less playable. That said, he went 6 in his last game, struck out 4, booked the quality start with just 1 earned run allowed, 3 hits. One of those hits was a solo home run. 8 innings against Detroit. The start before that, struck out 5, walked 3, just a 1-hitter there. I talked about this at the top of the show. But then all short starts and 1 relief appearance mixed in through there. A couple of 4-run games in limited innings. A 5-run game in 4 1/3 against the lousy White Sox. That's a comparable game. The Angels are better than the White Sox, I think, but 4 strikeouts, a walk, a home run allowed, 5 earned on 7 hits over 4 1/3. You could definitely get that kind of day from Tobias Myers. No guarantees here. But I think for the 65 on DraftKings, he's playable for 5 good innings and 4 or 5 strikeouts. If you're going to the Angels against Tobias Myers, I accidentally punched the microphone a second ago. Somebody tell me if I sound weird or if I changed anything by accident, by the way. Travis Wyndham lamenting the Jordan Alvarez absence 10 minutes too late. What? Larry, hold on. They're actually going forward with the Spaceballs sequel? With who? Spaceballs 2 in the works with Amazon with Josh Gad. Oh, for Christ's sake. So this is, somehow Josh Gad seems to have wormed his way into Mel Brooks' life, because I believe that he was involved with Amazon's production, or maybe it's just a deal with Amazon or whatever. But they did the History of the World sequel miniseries that I don't think I actually finished. I watched like the first 2 of them. But it seems like they're just squeezing the Mel Brooks canon. Wow. That's interesting. But I mean, Rick Moranis has not acted in years. Famously retired to take care of his kids after his wife died. John Candy is dead. Bill Pullman hasn't been a star in a number of years now. Daphne Zuniga, I don't know if she acts anymore. Mel Brooks is like 100 years old, so I don't think he's going to be in it all that much. I mean, you're telling a very different story. It's going to be weird. Larry says I don't lie or make shit up. I'm not sure. Probably Matt Damon and Ben Affleck will be in. Those guys can do comedy. The first Baseballs is a classic. I love the first Baseballs. I think it doesn't need to be messed with. Do you think they'll actually call it Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money? That would probably be the best joke in the movie if they did, and it's Mel Brooks' joke from the original. But especially since they're, how are you going to break John Candy's death in YouTube? Sorry if I crushed anybody there. Mamba pointing out that Soto or Judge on FanDuel plus 150 to home run. It's a pretty good spot there. Both those guys have monster numbers in the home run model. So if you're going to the Angels, now that we're off the Spaceballs front, check out Mel Brooks. If you're unfamiliar with the catalog of Mel Brooks, check out Mel Brooks. The one that they should try and remake is Blazing Saddles. I know people are out there saying, you can't make Blazing Saddles today, blah, blah, blah. You could never make this movie today. Bullshit. I think you could. I think you could absolutely make that movie today. Tone just has to be right. That would be the one where I was like, all right, that's not just cashing in. That's ballsy. That's creative. That's ballsy trying to make that movie again now. I think it's ballsy. I don't, think it's a not challenging task, but I think it's doable. The rest of his catalog, they already remade the Producer. Well, it was the musical version of the Producer, but they already remade that basically. They did the History of the World sequel. Probably not doing a Men in Tights 2. That would be weird. What am I missing? There's a whole bunch of good Mel Brooks movies. Well, regardless. Yeah, Larry, I see you apologizing for derailing the show here. All right, so for the Angels, Nolan Schanuel, Looters, and the info, Taylor Ward, the top 3 priority bats in this lineup, probably off the top. They're all very cheap. It is a reasonably believable value spot with the Angels here. 4.18 implied total, not all that low. But considering that you've got the really cheap now Astros at 5.23, and this came down to like 5.13 in the revised line, but the Astros are cheap, the Mets are cheap, the Twins are cheap. I just don't know how much you need the Angels value play, and they're obviously not a good team. So like, why roll the dice on Angels value when I can roll the dice on value with a much better group of hitters? Those are the 3 priorities, and then probably Brendan Drury and Logan O'Hoppe down here. Drury jumping back into the lineup is having a bad season, over 116 plate appearances, 168, 224, 234, just a 30 WRC plus and 1 home run. But over time has been a very capable bat. 28 home runs 2 years ago, 26 home runs last year, pretty good slash lines. So Drury's a good player for cheap pricing, especially on FanDuel first and second base at 2,200. Logan O'Hoppe, just a good catcher bat with a decent amount of power, 283, 30, 467 this year, 187 ISO, 9 home runs. He's just good. I have no issues playing that on any given slate. I think he's a believable catcher one-off on DraftKings at hitting 5th today. Not a bad option. Ward has 12 home runs, a 188 ISO. Renifo has 18 stolen bases, also a little bit of power. He's also slashing 315, 360, 435. Pretty good season so far, over 215 plate appearances for Renifo. Boy, if this team just had a superstar on it, or even better, 2 superstars, like in previous seasons, just seems like they were 1 year off their timing, where like some of these guys kind of hit their stride a little bit more. Could have been interesting. And then obviously this year, Trout got hurt. Downline, Willie Calhoun, not to skip over him in the cleanup spot, 32-26, having an okay year, over 137 plate appearances, decent slash line, but not a high priority bat. Not a guy who's been who hits a ton of home runs, despite hitting the ball fairly hard, doesn't barrel a lot of balls. More low strikeout balls in play, well-struck balls in play type. He is cheap. First base, not the ideal position to find a guy like that, but playable. Neto, Moniak, Joe Adell at the bottom of the lineup. Adell really scuffling now after his hot start. 12 home runs and 9 stolen bases. You're really only looking to him for unreliable counting stats. 222 ISO is still good, but everything else is greatly diminished. Also true for Mickey Moniak. 3 home runs and 4 steals, not even giving you counting stat output. Sub Mendoza really bad on base. He's been pretty weak this season. Neto's been okay. 10 home runs, 9 stolen bases. Over 260 plate appearances. 249, 297, 440. Probably easily the most playable option out of those 3 guys. The priority team here is the Brewers for sure. Nope, Mason Wynn scratched from the Cardinals lineup if you're playing the Cardinals on that other slate. Still no Brewers. So, assuming it's something like this, whether Contreras plays or not, we'll see. But I like Bryce Turan quite a bit at the top of the lineup. Lefty against Griff Canning is always appealing, 4,700, 3,000. He's got a little bit of pop in his bat, but he's more here to get base hits, get on base, steal a bunch of bases, create runs. And he's absolutely capable of doing that against this pitcher. There's a ton of contact available for him. He can exploit the walks. He doesn't strike out a lot. So love the opportunity for Bryce Turang at the top of the lineup. 26 stolen bases and a 120 WRC+. If Contreras plays, he's one of the best catchers in baseball. 5,400, 3,500 across sites. 305, 367, 467, 137 WRC+. Absolutely can sign me up for that. Christian Yelich, love the home run upside against Canning, or just, 4 really hard hit baseballs against Griff Canning. I'll take that. 326, 403, 494 for Yelich, over 197 plate appearances, 6 home runs, 14 steals. Tremendous player for a fair price. Willie Adames, 4,500, 3,300, has 12 home runs and 10 stolen bases. Also some home run upside at 9.66 in the home run model. You can see 3 guys right here just below the magic number. And then Rhys Hoskins at 12.31, well above it. He's got 10 home runs and 206 with a 201 ISO. 14.5% barrels for him, 10.5% for Willie Adames. Yelich actually down a little bit in the barrels, down a little bit in the hard hits, but it hasn't mattered all that much. Contreras, obviously, tremendous contact profile. Further down the lineup, Sal Frelick in the projected version. We might get Jake Bauers. We had Jake Bauers, I think, yesterday. 3,500, 2,500 for Frelick. He's more a correlated scoring option, a little bit of speed, 243 plate appearances of general mediocrity. I'd actually prefer Jake Bauers. Bauers homered yesterday. Maybe he gets back in today. Joey Ortiz is a tremendous option. He's got second and third base eligibility for just 2,900 on FanDuel. 3,800 third base only is a little bit less valuable on DraftKings. Very low strikeout, draws a bunch of walks against this pitcher. That's tremendous right there. He's also slashing, excuse me, slashing 277, 381, 467. Creator runs 42% better than average. He's also hit 6 home runs. Love the Ortiz option. Jackson Chourio for 32-26, 7 home runs, 8 steals. Been very, very up and down. Kind of a disappointing rookie season, but kid's only 20. Got to give him some time to grow. Any given slate upside for counting stats for sure, though. And against this pitcher, potentially very, very interesting from down lineup for a very cheap price. Blake Perkins has been pretty good. 5 home runs, 10 steals, 96 WRC+. Actually, has cooled off a little bit from what I was thinking of. 233 plate appearances. He's at 244, 318, 364 now. So he was doing pretty well, and he's cooled off a little bit. What's his recent stretch been? What's his most recent? This is not how we do things, but just want to see because I thought he had been on a decent stretch. I guess he cooled off. Had a bad last week. Better week before that. Yeah, it had good stretch through the last handful of days of May and the first week of June, and then went a little bit cold again. Playable part of the bottom of the lineup at worst. Brewers bats way up here. Probably followed by Angels bats, if we're being honest about it. But then Tobias Myers right there on DraftKings is a dart throw. On FanDuel, I don't really think you're going to Tobias Myers all that much. He's here, but you've got better options at similar prices. I think he's playable, but I don't really like the option all that much. And then if you really want to stack up premium in terms of just high-end bats across the board, you need more like one of these guys anyway. So I just think he's an awkward fit on the FanDuel slate at 79. Should be a little cheaper. Last game up. Holy hell, we did it. We actually have both of these lineups. Awesome. Coming up on 6 o'clock. So much for the short show that I said. One of these days I'm going to shock the world and just knock the whole slate out in a half hour. Be like, see ya. I don't think I get through the hello and welcome to the show and then here's the run board part in half an hour. Pretty sure I couldn't do that. If I did the entire show that was just the run board and the pitching breakdown, which I think is how a lot of people do their show, that could probably be a half hour. But then we wouldn't talk about all this fun stuff. We wouldn't find these sneaky little plays along the way. So Alec Marsh, I don't think he's going to be sneaky, but he projects pretty well against a scuffling Oakland team that's got a 26.7% strikeout rate against his 22.5 on the season, his 10% swinging, 26.7% CSW. It's not a bad pitcher. 3.63 ERA, a 3.97 xFIP over 67 innings, 12 starts. Gives up a little bit of premium contact, but it hasn't really killed him for home runs. Right? This is 7/10 higher than we would want it. We would normally be looking for sub 40%. 40, like our danger line, as I've said before, is 40 here, 90 here. This is a elevated barrel rate as well. It's a fly ball trajectory. So could believably be above a 4% home run rate. If we look back over time, last year was above. That was in 74 and a third on similar contact. So you can see this is almost exactly the same kind of contact. Actually, the exit velo is lower. And it was a 4.68% home run rate. So that is a dramatically higher home run rate. But there's a lot of good for Alec Marsh in here. Even if he comes out and gives up a homer to, say, Brent Rooker or Shea Langoliers or somebody like that in there. Yeah, that is. Mama's right. That was that Judge or Soto to homer plus 150 on FanDuel. That is free money. That's a play you would make every day. Marsh struck out 7 over 7 innings in a one-hit performance against the Yankees his last time out. If you need any believability from him, facing the Athletics now, I think we know that that's a fairly different kind of opponent. 8 strikeouts against of all teams. Seattle gave up 2 home runs and 4 earned runs in that game. Had a stretch 3 games, 2 home runs to Seattle, 1 home run to San Diego, and 2 home runs to Minnesota. For one of those games, Minnesota he struck out 7, Seattle he struck out 8. 4 earned runs, 5 earned runs, and 5 earned runs over that stretch, though. Not reliable by any means, but definitely has upside against this team and has the upside to book a healthy handful of strikeouts. 7-8 strikeouts is not out of the question for Alec Marsh here. So for 7,600, 8,800, easily a very playable value pitcher. Hogan Harris on the other side going up against a pretty frisky Royals team with a low strikeout rate. I don't love it. Over his 3 starts, he's been okay. 2.49 ERA, but a 4.09 xFIP, 22.8% strikeout rate, but an elevated walk rate. Moderate swinging strike rate with a lousy CSW, not great by stuff plus, a lot of barrels. If we look back to last year, it was similar. A lot of barrels, a lot of hard hits, a lot of exit velo, handful of home runs, a monstrous 7.14 ERA and a 5.21 xFIP, 19.7% strikeouts over 63 innings and 6 starts last year. I don't think Hogan Harris is all that appealing in this spot. Certainly not here. Really not here either. I think we just grab Royals bats against. Their run total's at 4.25. You can see his medium talent reflected in the 4.24 there. Medium talent, famously what Bill Murray called Chevy Chase in a fight back in the 1970s at Saturday Night Live. I do think you could grab a handful of Athletics bats. If you're building any kind of big Alec Marsh position, it's definitely worth a hedge. There's a couple of effective home run hitters in here. J.J. Bleday's got 10 on the season with an 8.40 in the model today and a 2.08 ISO. Brent Rooker has 13 with a 2.53 ISO and a 12.61 to lead the team in the home run model today. Miguel Andujar has 2 in just 85 plate appearances, just a 122 ISO, but a believable 8.41 based on some track record for power from years and years ago at this point. Soderstrom, 5 home runs in 98 plate appearances with a 2.14 ISO, has been pretty good and a lefty bat to throw in there against Alec Marsh. Believable 6.20 in the home run model. Shea Langoliers at 10.81. He's got 13 on the season to tie Rooker for the team lead. He's unreliable at best at everything else, but he makes excellent contact and he blasts the ball when he does. 2.37 ISO. Tyler Nevin, playable on DraftKings for 31. Kind of interesting if you're stacking this team anyway on FanDuel for the dead min. Over 140 plate appearances, 4 home runs, 122 ISO, 94 WRC+. Nothing overly appealing about that. Over 111 last year, he wasn't all that good, and over 184 the year before, he wasn't all that good. He's just cheap. Reasonably good premium contact. Not great, but that's okay. I thought I had a better sample somewhere in there to show for Tyler Nevin. When was he okay? I thought I remembered a stretch where he was okay. Why didn't I? Yeah. I guess it's AAA I was thinking of. 2023 in AAA in the Detroit system. He's also old. He was 26 years old this season, so take it with a grain of salt. But in 385 plate appearances in AAA last year for Detroit, he hit 15 home runs while slashing 326, 400, 543, and creating runs 36% better than average with a 217 ISO. Got a handful of mid-teens home run seasons in the minors, but hasn't really showed it in the show. I guess that's what I was thinking of. Anyway, he's the dead min in 3 positions on FanDuel, so not completely uninteresting. Lawrence Butler, dead min on both sites. Hasn't given us much this season, but for the min price, doesn't really have to. 2 home runs, 3 steals, and 121 plate appearances. Zach Geloff also hasn't given us much this season, but gave us a lot last year. Very playable part from the bottom of the lineup. Just a 245 on base, 189 average this season. Does have 5 home runs and 7 steals in 214 plate appearances. Missed some time last year, 14-14 over 300 plate appearances, slashing 267, 337, 504, creating runs 33% better than average. I'm still a believer in this guy versus this guy. We're closing in on matching sample sizes, though, so it's getting a little bit thinner, but I think he's easily playable if you're going to A's stacks. On the other side, the Royals are the more appealing of these two offenses. Michael Garcia has 17 stolen bases, but a 299 on base in the leadoff spot, 85 WRC plus, and continues to lead off every day. Just kind of baffling. Bobby Witt, I'm sorry to belabor that point, but you'd be a better team, Kansas City, if Michael Garcia wasn't leading off. It's indisputable. I know he's fast. That doesn't mean he should be leading off. If I had to pick from this lineup, I could honestly make an argument for leadoff Vinny Pasquantino. I think that's a better option. Hell, leadoff Bobby Witt isn't entirely crazy. It's just such a weird fit, considering the numbers he's putting up. I do think he's a good player. He hits the ball hard. He's 4,800, 3,200 at third base. He's very, very playable, and he's got a dynamite spot for correlated scoring. Just a weird fit in the leadoff role. Bobby Witt's a superstar, 6,400, 4,100. He's got 11 home runs, 21 stolen bases, a 377 on base, 155 WRC plus. It's tremendous. Vinny Pasquantino for 4,600, 2,800 continues to mash the ball when he makes contact, and he makes a ton of contact. 7 home runs. The output defies the premium contact and the low strikeout rate. Again, I do think we end up with higher numbers overall. 182 ISO. He's on track for an okay season. Should be better than this. I think will be better than this. Sal Perez, premium contact galore, 8.80 to sit just behind Bobby Witt in the home run model for this team. He's also got 11 homers, a 190 ISO. Has cooled off a little bit after a super hot start, but has been an excellent home run hitter from the catcher spot for years now. Nelson Velasquez for 36-27, 8 home runs on the season and 219 plate appearances. Everything else pretty much sucks, but he's playable for power upside against Hogan Harris, the lefty. Freddie Fermin, 3,400, 2,500, over 134 plate appearances, pretty decent triple slash, 2 home runs, a 107 WRC plus. Last year he hit 9 home runs and 235 with a good triple slash, so an effective enough catcher bat. You're not skipping Sal Perez for him, but if you need a cheaper option, it's a playable pivot. It's not an advisable pivot, but it's playable. You could put them both together on FanDuel, but Freddie Fermin's lower priority overall. Nick Lofton, Garrett Hampson, Kyle Isbell, a lot of replacement parts down the bottom of the lineup. That said, Garrett Hampson, over 104, has been at 295, 343, 379, creating runs 4% better than average. And Lofton has been getting on at a decent clip, 344 over 91 plate appearances. So playable parts, mix and match quality type guys down the bottom of the lineup for KC. Alec Marsh value, Kansas City bats, Oakland as a hedge position, and maybe a couple shots at Alec Marsh, even if you're not rostering Marsh. Not a priority in that case, though. Hogan Harris for me is a no. That is it up and down, gang. 6:05, we've got an hour till lock. We'll do the pitching board one last time real quick. FanDuel catcher first base, Contreras or Matt Olson, or flip a coin. First, we got to find out if Contreras is in that lineup. Matt Olson's never a bad decision, but it kind of depends on what you're doing. Is that a one-off, Michael? If it's a one-off, boy, that's close. Contreras has been far more consistent this season. I don't love grabbing players on their first day back from injury sometimes. Not that he's been out for a while or anything. He wasn't on the IL or anything. 9 points. Contreras, excuse me. Contreras has been the better of the two bats over this year. And he's been a good hitting catcher throughout his career. But Olson is probably the better DFS performer over the long term. Has more power. Slightly less consistent. He's on the team with the higher run total, but not by all that much. Braves at 5.05, the Brewers at 4.92. It's a really tough ask. What's in that lineup then? It would depend on, if it's not a one-off, then it would depend entirely on what's stacked around those players. I think, let's put it this way, Michael, or a coin flip is probably correct. You're not making a mistake either way. I would say if it's not a one-off, though, just consider what else is in those spots, in the spots around them. What are you stacking them with? Or is there purchasing power in going to another the same price? In a Brewer stack, then yeah, I would just go to Contreras if he's in the lineup. Yeah, if you're stacking Brewers, you probably want to include Contreras if he's playing. He did not play yesterday. And Olson is a very, very good alternative if Contreras doesn't play. You could stick Olson in there. You could keep your Brewer stack, put Olson in as a one-off at first base, and be perfectly fine. Pablo Lopez, top of the board if that game plays. 9,700 is a fair price on FanDuel. 9,000 is cheap on DraftKings. Both prices across the sites are very cheap for Framber Valdez against that White Sox team. I expect big things. We have run into spots over the years where expecting big things from Framber. I don't know if he pays attention to these shows. Not my show, but I don't know if he pays attention to when he's in a great spot and gets in his head. But every now and again, Framber can let us down. But I love the spot. I would absolutely play it given the salary. Tanner Houck against the Blue Jays. Totally believable for success. He's just very high priced. It's a little bit rough to get there, but I think that keeps him lower owned. I think somebody was backing that up in chat earlier. Meaning that other sites had him projected for low ownership. We obviously don't have ownership projection. Logan Webb going up against the Cubs. Believable to succeed. The wind's blown out, but the balls are going to be on the ground, so who cares? Same thing with Justin Steele on the other side of that game for a little bit cheaper. Both those guys are playable despite some high run totals in that one. Luis Severino, playable against the Rangers, 9,000, 8,300, better on DraftKings than on FanDuel. Chris Bassett against the Red Sox. I don't love it, but he's fairly priced for not loving it. He's effective, he eats innings. There's enough upside there for Chris Bassett to be playable at those prices. More effective as an SP2 on DraftKings for 85, but a little high price compared to a lot of the other SP2s on the board. Nestor Cortez falls into that same bucket. He's cheap on FanDuel at 82, but targeting the Orioles on a deep pitching slate in Yankee Stadium doesn't seem ideal to me. 88 just expensive on DraftKings, doesn't seem playable. Alec Marsh, easy value option to go to at 7,600 on DraftKings. 8,800 is not an incorrect price on the FanDuel slate. Projects out higher on the FanDuel board. Definitely interesting over there. You're just paying the same as you are for a lot of these other pitchers for him. Savali could find his form and succeed against this Twins team. That said, Twins look pretty good on the other side, and they're excellent, excellent value bats and value prices on that team, particularly on DraftKings today. So I prefer the Twins bats. Wouldn't be shocked if Savali beat them or at least held them in check, though. 77, 78, he's fairly priced for the Scuffles. Walker Buehler, 78, 73, fairly priced for a Colorado start for a pitcher who has yet to really find his form in his comeback from injury. $79.65. Myers, not really all that playable on FanDuel. You can mix and match him, though. He projects out just fine. I just don't know what the ceiling on that projection looks like. For $6,500, you don't really need the ceiling on DraftKings. You can just throw the value dart as an SP2. Lorenzen against the Mets. I prefer the Mets. 85, 8,000 is okay for Lorenzen if you want to throw a few darts. Better on DraftKings than on FanDuel by a pretty wide margin. Schwellenbach, 6,900 on FanDuel, 7,000 on DraftKings. Pretty interesting value option. Again, we've got weird sample sizes even through the minors because he hasn't pitched all that much. Never pitched above Double-A. Seems to have some talent. Is one of their higher rated prospects overall, and a very good matchup for the pitcher. You don't need that much too at the value pricing. He just makes a lot of back combinations work. So he's one of the more interesting value pitchers on the board on both sites, and he makes a ton work in comparison to all the other value options on the FanDuel slate. Hogan Harris, not really tackling it against KC. Albert Suarez, no way in hell against the Yankees. Jonathan Cannon, pretty strong no against the Astros, even with the diminished Astros lineup. They're super appealing with a cheapened version of their lineup with still a number of good options in it. And that that potentially sneaky Victor Caratini option at the catcher spot. Casey Mize against Atlanta at 6,000 on DraftKings. I don't think he's unplayable. You're really, really playing with fire. But I kind of like it better than some of these other options. Maybe that's just sick. You're dealing with a Braves team that has been dramatically underperforming, but does have a ton of upside. I was just talking about the Matt Olson play against. Matt Olson's got a ton of home run upside against Casey Mize. He's got talent, though. He's got good stuff. He's underperformed it. As I think it was Larry mentioned, multiple injuries for him, like devastating type injuries after being a super high-end pick and college player. Griff Canning is a hard no against Milwaukee. Milwaukee bats are very appealing against him. And then Austin Gomber is one of the worst plays of the year against the Dodgers. Not really, but, pretty bad option. Tigers bats for value. It kind of falls into that Angels bucket. I don't think it's crazy. 4.05 implied total for them. The Angels at 4.18. I think I said this about the Angels against Tobias Myers. And it's kind of the same thing. Where it's like, yeah, they're going up against like young, unproven pitchers, but like they're mediocre teams. And on a day where we're getting value from the Mets, value from the Astros, value from the Twins, I kind of don't know if we need to go there. And a lot of good value pitching options, or at least decent value pitching options from like the mid-range. I do think that, as I said when I broke the game down, Riley Green could be really appealing on his own just as a one-off play. I like Riley Green a lot, and 4,900, 3,100 is an appealing price against this pitcher. Matt Vierling's having an okay season. Mark Canha's all right. You get a lot of meh down the bottom of the lineup. So if you're talking about stacking the top four, sure. Maybe it's a three-man, like a 1, 2, 3. That's not to exclude all these guys, but I think it does lose a little bit of appeal. Like this average price is going to be lower. 34.89 average. No. Yes. What did I say it was? 34? Yeah, 34.89 for the Tigers. Or 4,200 apiece for the Twins. And that includes a 62 for Royce Lewis. So this is cheating a little bit. But it gets under 4,000 on average for the Twins bats if you're not including Royce Lewis in that average, which of course you're including him in your stack. So it does matter. But the point is, the Twins are exceedingly cheap for their talent, for their upside. The Astros, a diminished Astros lineup is almost at the same average as that Tigers team, 35.78 apiece on DraftKings. And that includes Jose Altuve at 53. If you took him out, you're at 33. They're actually cheaper. And they're going up against Jonathan Cannon. And they still do have Altuve, Pena, Bregman, Diaz. A good balls in play and hitting for average on the back of some Babbitt, Dubon. An interesting Victor Caratini that nobody's going to play, but I like the power upside at catcher. I just think it boxes out some of the other value plays in terms of quality. This is a much worse lineup than even that diminished Astros lineup is. So that's kind of where I come down on that question, Mamba. But they're certainly not unplayable, the Tigers. If that's your go-to value, like I won't necessarily take it away from you. It's just, you're really dealing with those four, and then you're mixing match options from down low. And it would probably be, for me, probably Colt Keith and Justin Henry. I think that's the way I would go there if you wanted to stretch. Probably be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 maybe. No real reason that I skip over Wenzel Perez instead for Justin Henry. You could easily go like that, outside of just not straight lining it. But yeah, they're on the board for value, but there are options I like better. Quick look at the home run board, then we're out of here. Got to get stuff updated. Judgy top of the board. Ohtani second, Soto third. So just to ram that point home, if that price is still available for the home run out of Judge or Soto, they're two of the top 3 overall players on the board. I do love Riley Green. No, Mama, don't get me wrong. I do love Riley Green. Yeah, Riley Green's my favorite bat on that team by a pretty wide margin. 10 plus in the home run model. He looks great. No. Either I misspoke or you misheard me, but I sorry about that if it was me. But yeah, I like Riley Green a lot. He's right here. He's the bottom man out of the guys above the magic number in the home run model. He's the bottom guy, but I love that bat. He's got 14 on the season. Definitely home run upside out of him. Lefty going up against the mediocre righty. But again, to your point before, Mamba, about that bet, Judge and Soto are 2 out of the top 3 options on the board. Gunnar in that Yankee Stadium game, not far behind. The home run pick of the day is Giancarlo Stanton out of the Yankees lineup, just because I didn't want to go Judge or Soto, but I wanted to take somebody in that game and didn't want to go to the Orioles. Rhys Hoskins, excellent option from the Brewers. You've got Teoscar in that Coors Field game and Will Smith both above the magic number. So obviously, some Dodgers bats, they're going to be super popular. But you're showing a lot of power from Milwaukee in the just under the magic number group here with 3 guys there. So arguably you could say there's 4 guys in that range on Milwaukee. Really like that option today. Milwaukee and the Yankees makes a lot of sense to me. The Yankees and the Twins, the Yankees and the Astros and the Twins together for value. The Brewers mixing into those combinations. Those 4 teams I'm really intrigued by. And then you get to the Braves in spots. Several of the Braves above the magic number here for power upside. You could certainly go in the Orioles direction if you wanted to against Nestor. The Rangers and the Mets, I think, are interesting options on the board. What you'll note is nobody from that Cubs game is on this top end. You have to go pretty far down to find somebody from that game with those ground ball pitchers. Anyway, gang, that is it from me. 6:18. So we did an average length show. Felt longer than usual. You guys absolutely rock. Apologies for the brain skips today as I was talking. A lot more just nonsense floating through my head than usual. A lot of clunky points today, but hopefully we got to some good stuff in there. We'll be better tomorrow. We'll be back at it. And that's it. Thank you, Mama. I already do feel better, Lara. I appreciate that, though, buddy. Thank you much. It's really just the voice at this point. Just sounds a little bit rough. But I'm going to go rest that now. Maybe have a nice big glass of iced tea or something. Cool off a little bit. Get the site updated. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. We'll see you tomorrow.